Imagine this. You wake to the howl of the wind, that endless, singing breath of the steppe. The air tastes of smoke and cold iron. Your eyes open to an ocean of grass that ripples beneath a sun still low and red on the horizon. Each blade glitters with frost. Each gust carries the scent of horses, leather, and the faint musk of blood. You shift under a cloak of rough hides. Beside you lies a bough, curved, elegant, deadly, its sinew strings still humming softly from last night's hunt. Your horse stamps nearby, steam rising from its nostrils. Somewhere beyond the low hum of the wind, a wolf calls. It's not a cry of threat. It's a reminder that this land belongs to those who can outrun hunger, endure the cold, and strike first. Welcome to the world of the Scythians. A people without walls, without kings, and without fear. The riders who ruled the winds. They called themselves Scythi, a word the Greeks heard and twisted into Scythians. But to themselves they were simply the people, children of the steppe, born in the saddle, cradled by the horizon. Long before the rise of marble cities, before empires carved borders into the earth, these nomads thundered across the heart of Eurasia, a living storm of hooves, arrows, and firelight. Their world stretched further than the eye could follow. From the dark forests of the Dnieper River to the rolling plains of the Altai, from the Black Sea's salt wind to the icy ridges that guarded China. A sea of grass, a land with no edge, that was their kingdom. And though no map could contain them, every empire of their age would one day fear their shadow. Imagine standing there, just as dawn breaks, feeling the pulse of that land beneath your boots. The wind is constant, whispering like a language older than speech. To the north, clouds gather in silver veils over the mountains. To the south, sunlight catches the glint of distant water, maybe the Caspian, maybe only a mirage. Everywhere, movement. Herds of horses, wild and half-tamed. Riders cutting through the mist like ghosts, their fur cloaks snapping, their eyes sharp as obsidian. They move not in straight lines, but in waves, following invisible trails through the grass, the ancient paths of migration, trade, and war. This is not a people from somewhere. This is a people of somewhere. The steppe is not their background, it is their bloodstream. The Scythians lived by one rule: motion is life. To stop was to die. Even their gods, it seemed, loved the hunt more than the hearth. They prayed to the eternal fire, to the sword of the sky, and to the horse spirit that carried souls between worlds. Every sunrise was a promise, every sunset a test. And when they rode, they did not gallop like men. They moved like wind. They bent low over their horses' necks, letting the motion of the animal and the rhythm of their breathing merge into one heartbeat. The bow they carried, short, curved, and deadly, was their soul-made weapon. No army on foot could catch them, no fortress could bind them. They struck where they pleased, vanished when they wished, and left behind nothing but smoke and fear. But let's step back, just a little. Before the battles and the gold, before their legends spread from Athens to Persia, who were they really? Historians tell us they appeared around the 8th century BC, emerging from the eastern steppes like dawn creeping across the world. Archaeologists find traces, arrowheads, bone combs, the charred circles of old fire pits, scattered like seeds across the plains. They were not the first nomads, but they were the first to master the horse so completely that their lives became inseparable from it. Every child learned to ride before they could walk. Every warrior was an archer, every archer a herder, every herder a raider when hunger demanded. They did not build cities, yet their presence was felt across thousands of miles. The Greeks knew them. The Persians feared them. The Chinese had heard their thunder long before they saw their faces. To settled empires, they were chaos incarnate, the storm that came without warning, that could not be bought, bribed, or caged. If you listen closely, really listen, you can almost hear them still. The drumbeat of hooves, the hiss of wind over fletching, the creak of leather harnesses under winter sun. Each sound, a heartbeat in the vast silence of history. They lived with their herds, horses, sheep, and cattle, always on the move. Their homes were wagons, covered with felt and hides, creaking like wooden ships sailing across a green ocean. Inside, smoke curled from small hearths. Women spun wool, shaped bronze, tattooed stories into skin. Children practiced with miniature bows, learning the feel of tension and release, the sacred rhythm that would define their lives. There was no single ruler over all the Scythians. Instead, there were clans, like stars scattered across the sky, each bright, each moving in its own orbit, yet bound by invisible ties of language, blood, and belief. When war came, they gathered like clouds, swift, silent, uncountable. When peace returned, they scattered again, leaving no trace but ashes in the grass. You might think that a people without cities would vanish without a mark. But the steppe remembers. Under its rolling hills lie the sleeping kings of the Scythians, buried in great mounds called kurgans, each packed with gold, horses, and weapons, each sealed beneath layers of earth and ritual fire. Even in death, they did not rest quietly. Their tombs whisper of a belief older than history, that the soul rides on, across the horizon, into the next world, as free as it was in this one. But that's a story for later, when we descend into those burial mounds, torch in hand, to see what riches and mysteries they left behind. For now, we're still on the surface, under the open sky, riding with the living. As morning turns to noon, the air grows warmer, and the horizon begins to shimmer. The smell of sage and dry grass thickens. You hear laughter, rough, booming, human. A Scythian camp. You approach, cautious, silent. Tents and wagons form a loose ring around a smoking fire. Men sit cross-legged, sharpening blades, their beards braided with bronze clasps. Women braid their hair in mirrored fashion, their hands calloused from reins and work, their eyes alert and unflinching. There is no softness here, only strength, shaped by necessity. Yet there's beauty too, fierce and unadorned. The kind of beauty that doesn't ask to be admired. It dares you to understand it. A young woman lifts her head as you draw near. Her cloak is trimmed with wolf fur. She's holding a cup of fermented mare's milk, pale and sour. She smiles, not with warmth, but with recognition. You are an outsider, but she knows your kind. Traders, storytellers, wanderers, the steppe has seen them all. She gestures for you to sit. The cup passes from hand to hand, its rim rough against your fingers. The taste burns your throat. You swallow anyway. The camp watches, and accepts you. At night, the steppe becomes a sea of firelight. Every camp glows like an island in the dark. Horses graze quietly beyond the ring of flames, their silhouettes ghostly under the stars. The air is thick with the smell of smoke and fat. A shaman begins to chant, low, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Drums join in, steady as a heartbeat. The flames flicker higher, painting faces in gold and shadow. This is how the Scythians remembered their world, not with books, not with stone carvings, but with stories carried on the breath. Tales of heroes who rode with the sun, of enemies who fled into the dark, of gods who demanded courage, not obedience. And always, always of the horse, the eternal companion, the bridge between the earth and the sky. If you could ask one of them, "Who are you?" they would not answer with a name. They'd point to the horizon. That was identity enough. Because to be Scythian was not to belong to a place. It was to belong to motion itself. To trust the horse beneath you, the bow in your hand, and the wind at your back. To live without fear of the unknown, because every dawn was the same challenge repeated: survive, and move forward. And so, the legend of the steppe began, not written, but written. 1,000 hooves pounding the earth into memory. As the night deepens, you lie beneath a blanket of stars so vast it seems to tremble. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls again. The sound isn't lonely. It's a song, the anthem of a people who learned long ago that freedom and danger are one and the same. Tomorrow you'll ride east, toward the dawn, toward the edge of history itself, where the story of the Scythians truly begins. But for now, you listen to the wind and the crackle of fire. The ancient steppe breathes around you, eternal, indifferent, alive. The legend is only beginning. Imagine this. You wake to the howl of the wind, that endless, singing breath of the steppe. The air tastes of smoke and cold iron. Your eyes open to an ocean of grass that ripples beneath a sun still low and red on the horizon. Each blade glitters with frost. Each gust carries the scent of horses, leather, and the faint musk of blood. You shift under a cloak of rough hides. Beside you lies a bow, curved, elegant, deadly, its sinew strings still humming softly from last night's hunt. Your horse stamps nearby, steam rising from its nostrils. Somewhere beyond the low hum of the wind, a wolf calls. It's not a cry of threat. It's a reminder that this land belongs to those who can outrun hunger, endure the cold, and strike first. Welcome to the world of the Scythians. A people without walls, without kings, and without fear. The riders who ruled the winds. They called themselves Scythi, a word the Greeks heard and twisted into Scythians. But to themselves they were simply the people, children of the steppe, born in the saddle, cradled by the horizon. Long before the rise of marble cities, before empires carved borders into the earth, these nomads thundered across the heart of Eurasia, a living storm of hooves, arrows, and firelight. Their world stretched further than the eye could follow. From the dark forests of the Dnieper River to the rolling plains of the Altai, from the Black Sea's salt wind to the icy ridges that guarded China. A sea of grass, a land with no edge, that was their kingdom. And though no map could contain them, every empire of their age would one day fear their shadow. Imagine standing there, just as dawn breaks, feeling the pulse of that land beneath your boots. The wind is constant, whispering like a language older than speech. To the north, clouds gather in silver veils over the mountains. To the south, sunlight catches the glint of distant water, maybe the Caspian, maybe only a mirage. Everywhere, movement. Herds of horses, wild and half-tamed. Riders cutting through the mist like ghosts, their fur cloaks snapping, their eyes sharp as obsidian. They move not in straight lines, but in waves, following invisible trails through the grass, the ancient paths of migration, trade, and war. This is not a people from somewhere. This is a people of somewhere. The steppe is not their background, it is their bloodstream. The Scythians lived by one rule: motion is life. To stop was to die. Even their gods, it seemed, loved the hunt more than the hearth. They prayed to the eternal fire, to the sword of the sky, and to the horse spirit that carried souls between worlds. Every sunrise was a promise, every sunset a test. And when they rode, they did not gallop like men. They moved like wind. They bent low over their horses' necks, letting the motion of the animal and the rhythm of their breathing merge into one heartbeat. The bow they carried, short, curved, and deadly, was their soul-made weapon. No army on foot could catch them, no fortress could bind them. They struck where they pleased, vanished when they wished, and left behind nothing but smoke and fear. But let's step back, just a little. Before the battles and the gold, before their legends spread from Athens to Persia, who were they really? Historians tell us they appeared around the 8th century BC, emerging from the eastern steppes like dawn creeping across the world. Archaeologists find traces, arrowheads, bone combs, the charred circles of old fire pits, scattered like seeds across the plains. They were not the first nomads, but they were the first to master the horse so completely that their lives became inseparable from it. Every child learned to ride before they could walk. Every warrior was an archer, every archer a herder, every herder a raider when hunger demanded. They did not build cities, yet their presence was felt across thousands of miles. The Greeks knew them. The Persians feared them. The Chinese had heard their thunder long before they saw their faces. To settled empires, they were chaos incarnate, the storm that came without warning, that could not be bought, bribed, or caged. If you listen closely, really listen, you can almost hear them still. The drumbeat of hooves, the hiss of wind over fletching, the creak of leather harnesses under winter sun. Each sound, a heartbeat in the vast silence of history. They lived with their herds, horses, sheep, and cattle, always on the move. Their homes were wagons, covered with felt and hides, creaking like wooden ships sailing across a green ocean. Inside, smoke curled from small hearths. Women spun wool, shaped bronze, tattooed stories into skin. Children practiced with miniature bows, learning the feel of tension and release, the sacred rhythm that would define their lives. There was no single ruler over all the Scythians. Instead, there were clans, like stars scattered across the sky, each bright, each moving in its own orbit, yet bound by invisible ties of language, blood, and belief. When war came, they gathered like clouds, swift, silent, uncountable. When peace returned, they scattered again, leaving no trace but ashes in the grass. You might think that a people without cities would vanish without a mark. But the steppe remembers. Under its rolling hills lie the sleeping kings of the Scythians, buried in great mounds called kurgans, each packed with gold, horses, and weapons, each sealed beneath layers of earth and ritual fire. Even in death, they did not rest quietly. Their tombs whisper of a belief older than history, that the soul rides on, across the horizon, into the next world, as free as it was in this one. But that's a story for later, when we descend into those burial mounds, torch in hand, to see what riches and mysteries they left behind. For now, we're still on the surface, under the open sky, riding with the living. As morning turns to noon, the air grows warmer, and the horizon begins to shimmer. The smell of sage and dry grass thickens. You hear laughter, rough, booming, human. A Scythian camp. You approach, cautious, silent. Tents and wagons form a loose ring around a smoking fire. Men sit cross-legged, sharpening blades, their beards braided with bronze clasps. Women braid their hair in mirrored fashion, their hands callous from reins and work, their eyes alert and unflinching. There is no softness here, only strength, shaped by necessity. Yet there's beauty too, fierce and unadorned. The kind of beauty that doesn't ask to be admired. It dares you to understand it. A young woman lifts her head as you draw near. Her cloak is trimmed with wolf fur. She's holding a cup of fermented mare's milk, pale and sour. She smiles, not with warmth, but with recognition. You are an outsider, but she knows your kind. Traders, storytellers, wanderers, the steppe has seen them all. She gestures for you to sit. The cup passes from hand to hand, its rim rough against your fingers. The taste burns your throat. You swallow anyway. The camp watches, and accepts you. At night, the steppe becomes a sea of firelight. Every camp glows like an island in the dark. Horses graze quietly beyond the ring of flames, their silhouettes ghostly under the stars. The air is thick with the smell of smoke and fat. A shaman begins to chant, low, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Drums join in, steady as a heartbeat. The flames flicker higher, painting faces in gold and shadow. This is how the Scythians remembered their world, not with books, not with stone carvings, but with stories carried on the breath. Tales of heroes who rode with the sun, of enemies who fled into the dark, of gods who demanded courage, not obedience. And always, always of the horse, the eternal companion, the bridge between the earth and the sky. If you could ask one of them, "Who are you?" they would not answer with a name. They'd point to the horizon. That was identity enough. Because to be Scythian was not to belong to a place. It was to belong to motion itself. To trust the horse beneath you, the bow in your hand, and the wind at your back. To live without fear of the unknown, because every dawn was the same challenge repeated. survive, and move forward. And so, the legend of the steppe began, not written, but written. 1,000 hooves pounding the earth into memory. As the night deepens, you lie beneath a blanket of stars so vast it seems to tremble. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls again. The sound isn't lonely. It's a song, the anthem of a people who learned long ago that freedom and danger are one and the same. Tomorrow, you'll ride east, toward the dawn, toward the edge of history itself, where the story of the Scythians truly begins. But for now, you listen to the wind and the crackle of fire. The ancient steppe breathes around you, eternal, indifferent, alive. The legend is only beginning. Always coming from somewhere, and going somewhere else. Their homeland was motion. Their ancestry was the horizon. And yet there are clues, bones in the permafrost, artifacts in frozen tombs. In the icy heart of the Altai, archaeologists found them, bodies preserved in gold and sorrow. Their skins still tattooed with swirling beasts, their hair braided and dark, their eyes closed as though still dreaming of the steppe. The cold kept them whole for 2,000 years. When their faces emerged from the ice, it was as though time itself blinked. The Scythians were no longer myth. They were flesh again. Their skulls show a mix of features, east and west, Europe and Asia meeting in bone. Their language, lost now, may have been Iranian in root. Their culture, though, was its own creation, a synthesis of everything the steppe had ever taught humanity. In them, east met west, and wind met fire. You ride with them again, in your mind. The land rolls beneath you like the back of a sleeping beast. Ahead, a line of riders crests a ridge, their silhouettes black against the molten dawn. They stop, scanning the distance. From here, the world looks endless. And perhaps that's the secret of the Scythians. They lived in a world too vast for fear. Empires crumble when they fear the edge. But these riders had no edge. Only the curve of the earth beneath their hooves, and the promise of another horizon waiting beyond the next. Their stories began to reach the Greeks through traders along the Black Sea, through colonies like Albia and Chersonesus, where merchants bartered grain and hides for olive oil and wine. They brought tales of a people who slept under the open sky, who used skulls as drinking cups, who wept into the wind when their kings died. Exaggerations, perhaps, but not entirely false. Scythian funerals were indeed wild, fierce celebrations of life, accompanied by sacrifice, song, and smoke. The Greeks listened in awe and horror, unable to decide whether to fear these nomads or to envy them. Because in a strange way, the Scythians embodied a freedom the settled world had already lost. No tyrant's decree could reach them. No city wall could cage them. They lived by the pace of their horses, by the warmth of their fires, by the constellations overhead. And that, perhaps, is why the Greeks gave them mythic origins, tracing them to Heracles, to gods, to serpentine women who birthed nations. They could not accept that mere mortals could live so untamed. The wind rises again, carrying the smell of distant rain. You look out over the grasslands, endless and pale under the sun. It's easy to imagine the world as it was then, the same rivers, the same sky, the same restless air. Only the riders are gone. You ride west, following the same invisible path they once did, and in the distance you see it, the faint rise of earth, unnatural, deliberate. A mound against the horizon. A kurgan. A tomb of kings. And as your horse slows, as you feel the first whisper of ancient air rise from the stones, you realize, this is where their story deepens. This is where the living give way to the dead. The origins of the Scythians are written in wind and motion. But their legacy, that lies beneath the soil. The wind falls silent as you stand before the mound. The grass parts gently around its base, as though afraid to disturb the sleep that lingers beneath. Somewhere below your feet, the remains of kings lie in the dark, surrounded by gold and silence, by the bones of their horses and the glint of buried arrows. You kneel, touch the earth. It's cold, firm, eternal. The air here smells faintly of iron and dust, the scent of age itself. For a moment, everything is still. Then, slowly, the world exhales. The grass stirs. A lark bursts into the air with a startled cry. The steppe comes alive again, the endless, breathing plain rolling toward the horizon like an ocean of green. The light changes, too, gold melting into silver, the day into the first quiet breath of dusk. And as you straighten, you realize something simple, and yet profound. There were no walls here. No towers. No gates or moats or cobbled streets. Nothing to keep the wind out, or to keep anything in. The Scythians built no cities. The thought feels strange at first. We are creatures who crave boundaries, walls that mark where one life ends and another begins. We measure civilization by its architecture, by its monuments, by the stone that resists time. But the Scythians left nothing of stone. They built in movement, in memory, in the fleeting beauty of impermanence. Their empire, if you can call it that, was not made of stone or mortar. It was made of wind, and hoofbeats, and the smoke of 1,000 fires. Their capital was the sky. Their streets, the herding paths worn into the grass by generations of horses. Their houses, the round-bellied wagons that creaked and sighed as they followed the seasons. They did not see permanence as virtue. To them, the world was not something to conquer or enclose. It was something to travel through, to live with. The land was too vast for fences, too alive for walls. Imagine it. The endless steppes stretching in all directions. You ride for hours, days, and still there is only grass, wind, and sky. No ruins. No smoke from distant chimneys. Only the faint traces of tracks, lines barely visible, curving through the grass like ripples left by forgotten caravans. Then, on the horizon, movement. A small procession of wagons, each pulled by oxen, their wooden wheels grinding softly against the dry soil. Around them, riders move like shadows, watchful, patient. As you approach, you begin to make out the shape of their lives. The wagons are round-roofed, covered with thick layers of felt and hide to keep out rain and cold. Children peek from inside, their faces smudged with soot. The air smells of horse sweat, wood smoke, and milk gone slightly sour. Each wagon is a home, small, mobile, and sacred. The Scythians called them kibitkas, rolling shelters that could be taken apart, packed, and rebuilt within a day. To you, it looks precarious. To them, it was perfect. Inside, the space is warm, dim, and alive. The walls are hung with embroidered cloth showing birds, beasts, and twisting vines, the same motifs that appear on their golden ornaments and tattooed skin. Everything they owned was portable, designed to be carried on the back of an ox or horse. Even their gods traveled with them, represented by small idols of wood or bronze, carefully wrapped in cloth and kept near the hearth. The hearth itself, that was the true heart of Scythian life. Every family kept a sacred fire burning, no matter where they roamed. It was the link between their ancestors and their descendants, a flame that had no home but the one they carried with them. When they stopped for the night, the fire was lit first and extinguished last. If the wind blew too hard, they shielded it with their cloaks. If the rain came, they built walls of turf to protect it. It was not just warmth. It was memory and identity. That's what most outsiders never understood. To the Scythians, the steppe wasn't emptiness. It was fullness, a living, breathing world rich with spirits and stories. Every hill had a guardian. Every river had a soul. Every storm was an omen. The land spoke to them, and they listened. You ride with them as they move, a slow migration, steady and deliberate. Their herds stretch for miles, dots of motion scattered across the grass. Goats, cattle, sheep, and always the horses. They are the pulse of the caravan. Without them, there is no life, no defense, no honor. When they stop, the camp forms a circle. The wagons are arranged with precision, the entrances facing inward. Children fetch water, Men drive stakes into the earth, women unpack hides and cooking pots. A small fire crackles to life. By sunset, what was an empty plain becomes a village, living, breathing, temporary. And then, a few days later, it vanishes. When the grass is eaten down and the herds grow restless, they move again. The fire is doused. The ashes scattered. The tracks fade within a week. To the eye of the outsider, it's as if they were never there. But to the Scythians, this impermanence was the point. They left no trace because the land itself was their legacy. When Greek travelers first wrote about them, they could hardly comprehend it. How, they wondered, could a people with no cities rule an empire larger than any city-state? How could those without walls defend themselves? And yet, paradoxically, the Scythians were the ones no empire could conquer. For the Persians, who built roads of stone and palaces of marble, the Scythians were a nightmare. King Darius himself marched an army of tens of thousands into the northern steppes, intent on bringing the riders to heel. He found no enemy, only wind and grass. The Scythians appeared, struck, and vanished. They burned their own pastures, poisoned their wells, led the Persians deeper into emptiness until hunger and despair did the killing for them. Herodotus would later write that the Scythians won by refusing to fight on anyone's terms but their own. No walls to breach. No cities to siege. Only the open sky, a kingdom that could never be taken. Their power came from invisibility. Their empire had no borders, only routes traced by hoof and memory. They controlled trade between East and West, between the Greeks on the Black Sea and the tribes of Central Asia. Amber, gold, slaves, spices, horses, all moved under Scythian protection or threat. They were not conquerors in the Roman sense. They didn't need to occupy land. The land itself was theirs, because they could move faster than anyone else. A Scythian warrior could ride for days without stopping. He carried dried meat under his saddle, letting the motion of the horse tenderize it. He drank mare's milk, slept in the saddle, woke with his bow already in hand. They lived so close to their animals that the line between them blurred, man and beast breathing as one. Their bodies changed to suit it, legs bowed from riding, spines strong, hands calloused from the bowstring. They became the shape of the steppe itself, lean, swift, enduring. And yet, for all their ferocity, they had no obsession with conquest. They sought balance, not empire. Their wars were often seasonal, short raids, fast strikes, a flash of terror and departure. To them, war was not about land but about honor and survival. They fought not to expand, but to remind the world that they were still there, untamed, undefeated. And when there was peace, they were traders, storytellers, healers. They met the Greeks at market towns along the Black Sea coast, exchanging hides and grain for wine and bronze. They returned with amphorae, mirrors, olive oil, and tales of faraway marble cities, which they described to their children with wonder and perhaps pity. Because to them, the people of the cities were trapped in their own walls. A Scythian could ride to any horizon he wished. A Greek could only walk the same streets, again and again. Night falls again on the steppe. The fire crackles. The stars appear, not a few, but countless, stretching from edge to edge of the sky. Here, under this immense dome, you begin to understand why they never built roofs. How could you enclose a world like this? The heavens themselves were their shelter. They needed no temple when the Milky Way was their ceiling. No cathedral when every sunrise was a sermon of fire and wind. A young boy sits by the fire, listening to an elder's voice. The elder's hair is braided with beads of bone. His face is lined like a map of storms. He's telling the boy of the first horse, the one the gods gave to mankind as a bridge between worlds. He speaks slowly, his breath visible in the chill. The boy listens, wide-eyed, his hands wrapped around a cup of milk. Outside the fire's glow, the herds graze quietly, the sound of their movement like distant surf. This, too, is architecture, a structure of stories, built not in stone, but in memory. Every tale, every song, every ritual is a wall against forgetting. And those walls have outlasted empires. The Scythians had no need for king's crown and palaces. Leadership flowed with the seasons, chiefs, elders, and warriors chosen by strength, wisdom, or the favor of the gods. Their laws were spoken, not written. A man's word was his bond. A lie was a curse. They valued courage above all, but also loyalty, to clan, to horse, to sky. Among them, wealth meant horses, not gold, reputation, not rank. You could lose everything and still stand tall if your name was strong enough to travel on the wind. Their women, too, carried that same spirit. They rode, they hunted, they fought beside their men. Greek writers, in awe and disbelief, called them Amazons. But to the Scythians, it was simply life. The steppe made no allowances for weakness. Every pair of hands mattered, every heart carried its share of the fire. In a world without walls, equality was born not of ideology but of necessity. When the storm comes, it doesn't ask your gender. When the wolf hunts, it doesn't spare the unarmed. Survival was democracy of the harshest kind. There's a beauty in it, isn't there? The simplicity of a life that belongs entirely to the moment. A civilization measured not in monuments, but in endurance. They built nothing permanent, yet their way of life lasted centuries. Longer, in fact, than many of the stone empires that mocked them. Even when their names changed, Scythians, Saka, Sarmatians, the rhythm endured. The wind carried it. The grass remembered it. And it still whispers, if you stand still long enough to listen. That whisper sounds like freedom. But freedom has a cost. Without walls, there is no shelter. Without roots, no return. The Scythians knew this. They carried their dead with them until the ground felt right, until the spirit of the place accepted the spirit of the man. Only then would they raise a mound, sing the final songs, and move on. Even in grief, motion never ceased. As the night deepens, the stars sharpen. You realize you've been following their same path, the invisible trails worn into the earth by centuries of hooves. Under the deepening violet sky, the steppe exhales again. The grass whispers, bending in one slow, endless ripple that looks almost like water. And through it, the heartbeat begins, faint at first, a tremor beneath the soil, a rhythm that seems to echo inside your chest. Hooves. Countless hooves. The wind carries their sound before it carries their bodies, a murmured thunder rolling closer, rising from the east like a promise. You feel it before you see it. The earth seems to quiver, the air thickens, and then, across the rim of the horizon, they appear. Shapes, fluid as smoke, emerging from the golden haze. Horses. Dozens, then hundreds, then more than you can count. Manes streaming, nostrils flaring, eyes bright with life. They move like a single being, each creature tuned to the breath of the others, hooves falling in perfect rhythm. You realize that what you're seeing isn't just a herd. It's history, alive and galloping. And at their center ride the Scythians. The horse was not merely the Scythian's companion. It was the Scythian. Their second self. Their twin. Their shadow that moved beneath them, loyal and unbroken. If the steppe was a god, the horse was its priest. Every heartbeat, every breath of wind across the grass, passed first through the animal and then into the rider. Together they formed a single, seamless being, half human, half wind. To live without a horse was to live half a life. From the moment a Scythian child could walk, they were placed on the back of a small, patient mare. By the time they could speak, they knew how to ride. By the age of 6, they could draw a bow from the saddle. There were no toys carved from wood in Scythian camps. There were bridles and miniature bows, tiny saddles for practice, and a field of lessons that stretched to the horizon. No child feared falling. The ground was their teacher, and the horse their school. They learned how to grip with their knees, how to feel the motion of the animal through their hips, how to breathe in rhythm, never fighting the gallop. only blending with it. By the time a Scythian reached adulthood, he and his horse shared a language without words. A shift of weight, a brush of knee, a whistle so soft it vanished in the wind, yet the horse understood. Look at them now, these riders of the plains. They move as if born from the saddle. Their legs curve around their mounts with effortless grace, their bodies rising and falling with the rhythm of the stride. Each carries a bow slung at the hip, a quiver of bone-tipped arrows, and a small, curved sword for when the distance closes and the world turns to chaos. Their horses are compact, not tall, not elegant by modern eyes, but built like iron. Short legs, broad chests, thick manes. They can run for hours without slowing. They can sleep standing, survive on frostbitten grass, drink from snow melt, and live through storms that would break stronger beasts. They are born in motion and die in motion, like their riders. The Scythians never bred for beauty. They bred for endurance. The kind of strength that comes from struggle, from winters that kill the weak and summers that burn the rest. When you look into the eye of a Scythian horse, you see not docility but defiance. A creature that serves only because it chooses to. At dawn, when the camp wakes, the first sound is always the horses. The nickering of foals, the stamping of hooves against hard earth, the snort of breath that clouds the morning air. Men rise to check the herd, to run hands through thick winter coats, to tighten bindings on fetlocks and examine hooves for stones. Women bring water and feed, rubbing the animals down with tufts of wool. Children dart among the legs of the smaller mares, laughing, fearless. Horses were not property, they were kin. When one was lost, the grief was ritual. A Scythian would cut a lock of his own hair, smear ash on his face, and sing a song of departure, a hymn for a friend returning to the sky. They believed each horse had a spirit, and that in battle, the horse carried not only the rider's body but his soul. When a great warrior died, his horse was buried beside him. Sometimes 20, sometimes 50. Their bodies laid in perfect order around the tomb, adorned with gilded harnesses and bronze masks shaped like the faces of beasts. A herd for the afterlife, so that even in death he would never walk. Beneath the earth, the bones of men and horses lie side by side, their stories intertwined beyond separation. And perhaps that is why, even now, when archaeologists open those frozen graves, the air that escapes smells faintly, impossibly, of sweat and hay. The scent of partnership. But this bond was not born of sentiment. It was born of survival. The steppe is a land of distances, wide, merciless, empty. A man without a horse is a shadow waiting to vanish. With their horses, the Scythians ruled a world larger than any empire. They crossed rivers without bridges, plains without maps, mountains without roads. They were their own messengers, their own armies, their own salvation. Even their warfare was poetry in motion. Picture it. A line of riders advancing at full gallop, the thunder of hooves pounding like war drums. Then, in one breath, they turn their bodies sideways, drawing their bows without breaking stride. Arrows fly backward, forward, in spirals, a dance of death that leaves no rhythm unbroken. The Persians had never seen anything like it. When Darius the Great sent his armies north to crush the Scythians, he expected to face a battle in the old sense, men standing firm behind shields. But the Scythians refused to stand. They moved. Always moving, always circling, striking at night, vanishing by dawn. They burned the grass behind them so the enemy's horses would starve. They led the Persians deeper into emptiness until hunger and exhaustion shattered the greatest army in the world. The Scythians didn't win by strength. They won by rhythm, by the eternal partnership of rider and horse. But the horse's role wasn't only in battle. It was in everything. The Scythians drank its milk, fermented it into kumis, a sharp, sour drink that burned the throat and warmed the blood. They made ropes from its hair, coats from its hide, glue from its hooves. Even its dung was precious fuel on the treeless plains. The horse gave them everything, and they, in return, gave it reverence. In rituals of birth, a mare's mane might be cut and tied around the wrist of a newborn, a symbol of strength, of endurance, of kinship. In rituals of love, a man might gift a woman a horse as pledge of marriage, not as property, but as promise. We will ride the same path, through wind and snow, until the horizon runs out. In the stories told by firelight, the first horse had come from the sun, a spark that fell to earth, split open, and became a creature of flame and muscle. Every gallop, they said, was the memory of that descent, the sun's heartbeat, still echoing on the ground. The Scythians spoke to their horses in low tones, using clicks, whistles, and soft hums. No shouting, no whips. They trained through trust, not fear. A Scythian could guide his mount with a single touch of the thigh, could make it stop on a whisper, turn on the breath of a hand. In winter, when the grass turned brittle and white, the horses pawed through snow to find hidden roots. Their riders watched, learned, and followed, letting the animals teach them how to survive. In this way, man and horse became a single species, each completing what the other lacked. When a blizzard rolled across the plain, the kind that erased sky and ground, the Scythians tied themselves to their horses and let the animals lead them through the storm. The horses could smell shelter long before humans could see it. And when they found it, a hollow, a ridge, a grove of scrub trees, the Scythians built fires in the lee of their bodies, sharing warmth beneath the same sky. It wasn't poetry to them. It was life. The Greeks wrote of this bond with awe and confusion. In their myths, they transformed the Scythians into centaurs, half man, half horse, unable to imagine such unity as real. To them, the image was monstrous. To the Scythians, it was simply accurate. When Greek sculptors carved those figures of men fused with beasts, they were recording not fantasy, but witness. Somewhere, deep in their memory, they had seen riders move across the steppe as if their legs were extensions of the animals they rode. No separation, no divide. Only motion. Only the living wind. In the quiet hours after battle, the Scythians honored their horses with ritual. They brushed their coats with oil, braided their manes, and sang to them. Some horses bore small tattoos burned into their hides, spirals, sunbursts, marks of spirit and lineage. They were family, as sacred as blood. There were legends, too, of horses that wept when their masters died. Herodotus wrote that the Scythians would slit the throats of the finest beasts at a king's funeral, believing their souls would carry his to the next world. It was said that when the first snow fell after such a burial, the ground trembled, not from wind, but from unseen hooves, as the spirits of those horses galloped through eternity. To ride was to live. To die without a horse was to wander the afterlife on foot, a shame few could bear. As the centuries passed, other peoples learned from them. The Persians, the Sarmatians, the Huns, the Mongols, all would inherit the Scythian art of mounted war. The rhythm of hoof and bow, of motion as life, would echo across ages and continents. But none would ever quite match the grace of the originals, those first lords of the steppe who turned the horse into an idea, into freedom incarnate. For when you watch them ride, truly watch, you see that they are not galloping across the earth, but with it. Every rise and fall of the horse's body syncs with the land's own breathing. Every hoofbeat is a syllable in the poem of existence. And every Scythian who ever lived carried that poem inside them, as naturally as their heartbeat. Dusk gathers once more. You sit at the edge of the camp, watching as the herds settle for the night. The air hums with low sounds, the shuffle of hooves, the slow exhale of tired animals, the creak of saddles hung to rest. A young rider leads his horse to water, whispering softly to it, his hand resting against its neck. In that gesture, that quiet intimacy, the entire Scythian world is contained. The night breathes slow and deep, as if the earth itself is sleeping. Only the horses remain restless. They snort softly, turning their heads toward the horizon, ears twitching to some rhythm older than drums. You sit by the dying fire, the embers low and red, and realize what they hear, what they always hear. War. It is coming, as inevitable as sunrise. It has been written into the wind since the first rider learned to draw a bow from the saddle. For the Scythians, war is not an interruption of peace. It is another season, a wild harvest of courage, blood, and destiny. The first sign is always the sky. Before battle, the clouds gather low and heavy, their bellies dark as iron. A storm on the steppe moves faster than thought, rolling, roaring, devouring the horizon. The riders read it as an omen, as language. If the wind turns cold before dawn, the gods are watching. If the horses shiver though the air is still, the spirits of the dead are near. On the morning of war, every movement is ritual. The fires are extinguished, the wagons closed, the hearths sealed with ash. The women sing, low, rhythmic, ancient, songs that do not beg for victory, but for memory. The men prepare their weapons in silence, the bronze glinting in the half-light. The sound of sharpening blades mingles with the steady breathing of the horses. You can smell the oil on the bowstrings, the smoke in their hair, the sweat on their skin. They do not hurry. A Scythian knows that fear wastes strength. Calm is their armor, patience their first weapon. The bow, that sacred curve of horn and sinew, is alive in their hands. Its shape seems almost to breathe as it bends, the sinew fibers creaking like bone under strain. It is small enough to be drawn from horseback, yet powerful enough to pierce armor at 200 paces. The arrows are tipped with bronze or bone, some with barbs carved into cruel spirals, designed to tear instead of pierce. Each arrow is personal, fletched by hand, marked with subtle patterns of paint or feathers so the warrior can know his work even after death. The quiver hangs at his hip, bound with leather and beads. The sword, a short, curved blade, rests opposite it, for when the distance between life and death closes to the length of an arm. A Scythian's armor is light, layers of hardened leather and bronze plates stitched into the hide of horses. The helmet, crested with fur, glints with inlaid gold and turquoise, not for vanity, but for ritual protection. Every piece is made to move, to flow with the body, to become part of the rhythm of motion. A Scythian warrior is never still. Even when waiting, he seems to sway slightly, as though the horse beneath him is invisible but still galloping somewhere just beyond sight. Before the battle, they perform the old rite. In the center of the camp, a sword is driven point first into the earth. Its blade catches the dawn like fire. This is not merely a weapon. It is their god, the embodiment of war itself. They circle it on horseback, calling the names of ancestors who fell in battle, voices rising and falling like the wind. The horses prance, foam gathering on their mouths, eyes bright with fear and fury. Then silence. A single heartbeat, still as stone. And then motion. They ride out in waves, their horses breaking into perfect formation as naturally as starlings in flight. No shouted orders. No banners snapping in the wind. Only instinct. They have fought together since childhood, brothers, cousins, rivals, friends. They know each other's breathing as well as their own. You ride among them now, the air sharp in your lungs. The ground trembles beneath 1,000 hooves. Ahead, the enemy is only a line of dust on the horizon. But every Scythian already sees the outcome, not with eyes, but with the memory of 1,000 hunts. For to them, war is only the hunt magnified, the same patience, the same timing, the same understanding that victory belongs to those who master stillness before speed. At a signal, a raised hand, a flash of sunlight off bronze, the front ranks split like a wave. They scatter left and right, circling the unseen center. Arrows rise. The first volley falls like rain, and the battle begins. The sound is not shouting or chaos. It's rhythm. The hiss of arrows, the drumming of hooves, the deep, rolling thunder of 1,000 bodies in motion. Each rider fires 3, 4, 5 shots before wheeling his horse in a tight arc, never breaking stride. The air fills with streaks of bronze and feather. When one horse slows, another takes its place. When one rider falls, the next passes over him, silent. They do not stop. They never stop. To their enemies, the Greeks, the Persians, the tribes who dared cross into their plains, it must have seemed like facing a storm, that thought. You cannot fight what refuses to stand still. You cannot conquer what has no city, no home, no single heart to pierce. The Persians tried. They brought armies vast enough to drown the steppe in men and metal. But the Scythians did not fight where the Persians expected. They burned their own grasslands, poisoned their wells, and retreated into emptiness. Each day the Persians chased them. Each night the Scythians struck back, burning the supply lines, stealing the horses, killing the scouts. By the time Darius turned back toward the Black Sea, his army was a shadow of itself, his pride buried somewhere in the endless wind. The lesson spread quickly through the world. You cannot cage the steppe. Among the Scythians, bravery was not recklessness. It was endurance, the ability to ride through pain, through fear, through the long silence that comes before the killing starts. A coward was not one who fled, but one who froze. And a hero was not one who killed, but one who returned to the fire with his honor intact. When they took captives, the Scythians would share the blood of the first slain enemy in ritual. Not out of cruelty, but reverence, the belief that the blood carried power, that to spill it was to honor both life and death. The Greeks were horrified, but they misunderstood. The Scythians did not drink to desecrate, they drank to remember. Every battle was a dialogue with the gods. Every kill was an offering to the balance of the world. Their enemies feared them not only for their speed, but for their silence. Scythian warfare had no shouting, no trumpets, no declarations. Only the wind, the bow, and the breath between them. After the fighting ends, the steppe grows quiet again. The smell of blood fades into dust. Crows will overhead, their cries harsh and triumphant. The survivors gather by the rivers, washing their weapons, their faces, their hands. Some kneel and press their palms into the earth, whispering thanks to the spirits of those who fell. The Scythians believed the dead could still hear the wind, still watch the riders who lived. To ignore them was to invite misfortune. A small group moves among the bodies of the slain. They collect the arrows, not to reuse them, but to count them, to mark the story of the fight. Each arrow tells a name. Each mark of blood is a signature on the scroll of the day. Later, when the fires are lit again, they will retell the battle in low voices, around cups of fermented milk and wine traded from the Greeks. The stories will not glorify the killing, but the endurance, who rode furthest, who did not falter, who returned despite the wound. Victory is not celebration. It is continuity. It means that tomorrow, the clan will move again. The rhythm of life resumes. You might think their lives were endless conflict, but war, for the Scythians, was only one expression of a larger truth. Everything alive must move toward balance. Too much peace breeds weakness. Too much war breeds madness. Between them lies the narrow path of harmony, the horse's gait, the bow's tension, the hunter's patience. That is where the Scythian lived his life. Even their training was a meditation. Young men practiced archery on horseback for hours, not by aiming at targets, but by learning the feel of distance. They could sense a change in wind before it touched their faces. They knew by instinct when to loose the string, not at the moment of sight, but at the rhythm of breath. It was not marksmanship. It was music. At night, when battle songs fade and the steppe returns to silence, the warriors lay their weapons beside them as they sleep. Not out of fear of attack, though that is never far, but out of respect. The bow, the sword, the quiver are companions. You do not cast them aside. You rest with them as you would with a friend. Sometimes, on nights after victory, they hold quiet feasts. A horse is slaughtered, its spirit sent to carry messages to the ancestors. The warriors sit in a ring, sharing meat roasted on bronze spits, drinking wine thickened with honey. They do not toast to conquest. They toast to endurance, to the endless horizon that still lies ahead. And in that moment, between firelight and darkness, they look less like conquerors than monks. Men of motion, serving not a king, but a creed older than empires, that the world belongs to those who can move through it without chains. The wind changes. It comes now from the east, cooler, scented faintly with snow and metal. You turn your head toward it, and see the light thinning across the horizon, that pale, silken moment when day begins to give way to memory. The riders have gone. The smoke of their camp has drifted into the vastness. All that remains is the hush after thunder. And in that hush, something gleams. At first it looks like sunlight caught in the grass. Then the light deepens, thicker, steadier, as though the earth itself is bleeding gold. You ride closer, your horse's hooves muffled by the soft ground. There, at the base of an old mound half swallowed by weeds, the soil has been disturbed. A flash of metal winks between the roots, a curve, a line, a fragment. You dismount and crouch, brushing the dirt away with your fingers. The earth is cold, damp, and smells of iron and age. A small ornament emerges, a deer, its legs folded beneath it, its neck stretched as if leaping toward the sky. Its body is made of pure gold. The Scythians called it the flesh of the gods. No people of the ancient steppe ever shone like the Scythians. They lived in motion, yes, in dust, in sweat, in the endless grass. But their treasures gleamed like captured sunlight. They adorned themselves, their weapons, their horses, their dead. They covered the rawness of survival with beauty so fierce it still dazzles across 2,000 years. Archaeologists who opened the kurgans found it everywhere, buried beneath layers of frost, sealed in wooden chambers lined with felt. Necklaces, belt buckles, headdresses shaped like wings. Chalices so delicate they seemed made for spirits rather than hands. Tiny plaques carved with images of animals locked in eternal battle, stag and panther, eagle and serpent, lion and horse, each one alive in motion, as if caught in mid-breath. How could a people without cities, without forges large enough to echo, craft such things? Where did this gold come from, carried across a land that left no trace of walls or temples? To the Greeks, it was sorcery. To the Scythians, it was simply the breath of the earth made visible. Imagine walking through their camp at dusk. The light from the fires turns every ornament to living flame. A warrior passes, his cloak fastened by a golden clasp shaped like a crouching cat. A woman bends to stir a pot. The earrings at her ears sway like tiny suns. Even the horses glitter, their harnesses studded with bronze and gold plates carved into leaping stags and birds with curling tails. It isn't vanity. It's language. Each image means something. The stag, grace, speed, resurrection. The griffin, watchfulness and vengeance. The coiled panther, ferocity and defense of kin. Every symbol a prayer, every sparkle a promise. The Scythians wore their myths on their skin. When a warrior rode into battle, his armor was not merely protection. It was a story told in metal, the beasts of sky, earth, and underworld intertwined, as if the universe itself moved with him. He carried his faith not in temples but in the shimmer of sunlight across his chest. The Greeks called their style zoomorphos, animal style, because it pulsed with life. Every curve, every line, every claw and feather was alive with motion. There are no still animals in Scythian art. Even in death they leap. It was the art of transformation, the moment between predator and prey, between living and dying, between flesh and spirit. That moment, to the Scythians, was sacred. They believed the world was woven of such transitions, one endless circle of change. A stag eaten by a wolf becomes part of the wolf. A warrior who dies becomes the wind that guides the herd. The gold itself becomes a bridge between worlds, incorruptible, eternal, unbroken. To bury gold with the dead was to anchor their souls in light. As you brushed more soil away, The little golden deer in your hand catches the dying sunlight. Its body is smooth, yet every muscle seems to ripple. It feels warm. For a moment, absurdly, you think it might be breathing. And then you remember what the old historians wrote. Herodotus described Scythian burials filled with gold, so much of it that even their saddles glittered. He said their kings were buried with cups of pure gold, with ornaments of lions, stags, and birds, and with daggers whose hilts were heavy with gems. But Herodotus, for all his wonder, could never have known how much more lay beneath the ground. Centuries later, when the frozen mounds were opened in the Altai, the light that spilled out blinded the first men who saw it. Imagine that moment. The pickaxes strike wood. The air that escapes smells of cedar and age. Then, as they lift away the planks, the chamber is revealed. A man lying in state, his body wrapped in felt, his face covered with gold leaf. Around him, horses, fully harnessed, their bridles worked with gold. Beside him, a woman, her body adorned with hundreds of tiny plaques, each depicting a creature in motion. And scattered throughout, ornaments still shining as if they had been made yesterday. It was as though the sun had been buried and was rising again from the earth. But the mystery of Scythian gold was not only in its beauty. It was in its purpose. To the Scythians, gold was alive. It carried spirit, heat, divinity. They did not use it for trade or coinage. They would not melt it into ingots. It was too sacred for commerce. It belonged to ritual, to the language between human and divine. When they buried their dead, they did not adorn for vanity. They armored the soul for its journey. Gold did not corrode, did not decay. It held the essence of life, unbroken by time. To be covered in gold was to remain visible in eternity. And yet, for all this reverence, they never worshipped gold itself. They worshipped what it represented: light, fire, endurance. The same qualities they sought in themselves. In a world of wind and ice, gold was permanence made visible. It was proof that something could survive the storm. The craftsmanship itself remains astonishing. Without great cities, without the organized workshops of the Mediterranean, the Scythians still mastered the metal. Somewhere in their migrations, perhaps near the Black Sea or the Urals, there were hidden forges, small, nomadic, easily dismantled. The artisans traveled with the tribes, carrying their tools in chests, working by the light of fire. They melted gold in clay crucibles, poured it into molds carved from bone, hammered it into thin sheets on stone anvils. The precision was surgical. A single plaque the size of a palm could contain dozens of incised lines, each furrow thinner than a hair, each muscle perfectly alive. There must have been apprentices, masters, secrets passed in whispers. The steppe itself became their workshop. The wind cooled the metal. The open sky reflected in every polished surface. They forged under stars, not ceilings. And when a piece was finished, it was not displayed for pride. It was worn in silence, as a living talisman. A warrior might touch the gold at his chest before riding into battle, whispering a prayer to the creature carved there. A mother might tie a small plaque of an eagle to her child's cradle, believing it would teach the baby how to rise. Even the horses carried gold, amulets shaped like wings, attached to the bridle to remind them they were creatures of the sun. You close your eyes and picture one of those royal burials, the richest of them all. The mound rises like a hill on the plain, its shadow long and solemn. The funeral procession approaches, hundreds of riders, their faces painted red with ochre, their hair braided and dusted with gold powder. They sing, not a song of sorrow, but of transformation. At the center, a wagon draped in felt. Upon it lies the body of the king, his armor gleaming, his sword resting across his chest. His horses walk beside him, unshod, silent. The earth is opened. Inside the chamber, the gold already waits: cups, daggers, ornaments, and the great headdress shaped like a rising stag. Each item placed with ceremony, each position a prayer. The air is thick with the scent of incense and smoke. The shamans chant, the drums pulse low and steady. When the body is lowered into the tomb, they scatter gold dust over his face so he will shine in the dark. Then, as the last torch flickers, they seal the chamber. The steppe closes above it, and silence returns. To the Scythians, this was not burial. It was sunrise underground. But centuries pass. The steppe moves on, swallowing memory. The wind erases tracks, the grass grows tall again. Only the gold endures. When the first archaeologists found it, they called it treasure. They counted, measured, catalogued. But they did not see what it truly was. To hold a Scythian ornament in your hand is to touch a heartbeat preserved. Every curve is a syllable in their lost language, every animal a word in their unwritten hymn. The stag that leaps is not decoration, it is the moment of escape. The eagle that strikes is not symbol, it is the will to live. Even the curling vines and intertwined bodies are not mere patterns. They are the map of the universe as the Scythians saw it. All things entwined, locked in eternal motion. And still, the question lingers, how did such beauty survive amongst such harshness? How could nomads of the cold, whose days were filled with battle and hunger, create art so tender, so precise? The answer, perhaps, lies in what they saw around them. When you live your life beneath the open sky, you cannot ignore the details of the world. You see how the light changes on the grass, how a hawk's shadow moves like thought, how frost etches its own art onto stone. For the Scythians, beauty was not luxury, it was the proof of existence. To make something beautiful was to assert that life, no matter how brief, was still sacred. Their gold was not separate from survival. It was survival's mirror. You turn the small deer in your hand once more. The last sunlight slips beneath the horizon, but the gold continues to glow, as if holding its own memory of the sun. The air grows colder. The steppe begins to sing its endless song of wind and dusk. Somewhere behind you, the night gathers. The stars appear, slowly, quietly, like eyes opening above the plain. The night stretches over the steppe like a black pelt. The stars above are fierce and close, their light sharp enough to cast faint shadows. Your horse moves slowly, hooves making no sound in the tall, frost-stiffened grass. Somewhere ahead, a hill rises against the starlit horizon. At first it seems ordinary, a swell of earth shaped by wind and time. But as you draw nearer, you see its perfect curve, its deliberate symmetry. It is too regular, too solemn to be a natural thing. A kurgan. A tomb. A sleeping kingdom beneath the soil. The air around it feels different, thicker, somehow older. The wind hesitates when it passes over. Even the horses lower their heads as if in reverence. You dismount, the ground firm underfoot, and stand at the base of the mound. It rises high as a fortress, layered with centuries of dust and grass, each blade rooted in the bones of those buried below. The Scythians called these places kurganos, the houses of the forever riders. To them, death was not an end, but a continuation of motion in another form. The mound was the gate between worlds, one built not to keep death out, but to help the spirit find its way beyond the horizon. You climb slowly. The slope is steep, the air biting cold. Halfway up, you turn and look back. The steppe stretches away in every direction, vast and silver under moonlight. There are other mounds out there too, smaller, barely visible humps on the plain, each one a whisper of a life once lived. They dot the landscape like constellations fallen to earth. And just as stars have patterns, so too do these mounds. They are aligned with rivers, with the paths of migration, with the invisible roads of the sky. The Scythians built their graves as they lived, according to motion, not geography. Each kurgan marks not only a death but a direction, the route the soul would travel on its final journey. When you reach the summit, the wind hits you full in the chest. It smells of cold clay, distant rain, and faint smoke from some unseen camp. You close your eyes and feel the earth humming beneath your feet. It is not imagination. The steppe is alive with memory. Beneath you, sealed in darkness, lie centuries of silence. Warriors, horses, treasures, and songs no one remembers. The first of these great tombs appeared around the 6th century BC, when Scythian kings ruled the plains from the Black Sea to the Altai. They were monuments to power, but also to faith. Each one was built with ceremony that could last weeks. When a king died, word spread like wind through the tribes. Messengers rode for days to summon the clans. The camp would grow vast, thousands of people, hundreds of wagons, herds of horses grazing on the outer rim like waves around an island. Then began the ritual of death. First, the body was prepared. It was washed in fermented herbs, anointed with oil, wrapped in felt. The skin was sometimes covered in sheets of gold beaten thin as breath, shaped to the features of the face, a mask to protect the soul's passage. Around him, his closest companions were chosen to follow. It was an honor, though not one freely refused. The Scythians believed a king should not ride into the next world alone. His best horses, his warriors, even servants and favored animals would accompany him, their spirits forming the retinue of eternity. The grave itself was dug deep, a chamber lined with timber, often 2 or 3 levels below ground. At its center stood a wooden bed, the frame carved with animals and inlaid with metal. On it lay the king, his hands folded over his chest, his sword beside him, his bow across his knees. Around him were placed the offerings: cups of gold, bowls of grain, jars of wine, weapons, ornaments, clothing, and the small carved creatures that served as spirit guides. Horses were led down ramps into side chambers, their harnesses gleaming, their heads decorated with masks shaped like eagles or rams. Some wore antlers of gilded wood, turning them into mythical beasts meant to guide the dead through the sky. When all was ready, the shamans lit torches and began to chant. Their voices rose and fell, echoing against the wooden walls, calling to the spirits of the earth and wind to open the passage. Outside, the people waited in silence. Then, at the final cry, the entrance was sealed. Logs were stacked, earth heaped high, layer upon layer, until the mound took shape, rounded, eternal, smooth as bone. The last act was always the same. A rider circled the mound 3 times at full gallop, then stopped, dismounted, and drove his spear into the ground. The earth swallowed the sound, and the people turned away. Archaeologists have found these tombs frozen in time. In the permafrost of the Altai, the wood still smells faintly of resin. The fabrics, though brittle, still hold their colors. Even the tattoos on the skin of the dead remain visible, swirling patterns of beasts and vines crawling across the arms and chest. One woman, perhaps a priestess, perhaps a queen, was buried in a fur coat embroidered with golden felines. Her hands were folded over a mirror of polished bronze, her hair braided and dusted with red pigment. The horses at her side were wrapped in felt blankets. Their eyes were covered with golden discs. They looked as though they were only sleeping. In another mound, a warrior rested beneath a canopy of wooden beams. Around him, 20 horses lay in perfect formation. Each one faced east. Each one wore a mask shaped like the face of a different creature: a stag, a griffin, a ram, a bird of prey. It was a procession of souls, frozen mid-journey. When the explorers first saw them, they could hardly breathe. The air inside the tomb was heavy, ancient, charged. The light of their lanterns made the gold flicker as if alive. It was said that one man dropped to his knees, unable to stand. Not out of fear, but as if he had stumbled into the presence of gods. The Scythians believed that the dead traveled along a great road of stars. Their kurgans were built to mirror the constellations, especially the path of the Milky Way, which they called the celestial steppe. To them, death was another kind of migration. The soul, like the herds, followed the seasons, leaving the cold body behind to ride into the realm of light. But the passage was perilous. Without the right offerings, the spirit could lose its way. That is why they bury not only gold, but the tools of daily life, wooden combs, iron knives, leather pouches, even seeds for planting. Everything a traveler might need between this world and the next. And perhaps that is the strangest thing about these graves. For all their grandeur, they are intimate. The objects within are not symbols of power alone, they are fragments of home. You can almost see the hand that once held the cup, the lips that once touched it. Each item is a conversation left unfinished. You walk slowly around the mound's base. The moon climbs higher, bathing the grass in silver. Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf howls, long and low, as if calling to the sleepers below. The sound makes the air tremble. You imagine the kings stirring in their chambers, turning their heads toward the voice. The Scythians would have understood such a call. To them, the boundary between life and death was never absolute. The dead listened. The living answered. At certain times of the year, perhaps in spring, when the herds began to move, the clans returned to these burial grounds. They lit fires atop the mounds, poured libations of milk and wine, and feasted beside their ancestors. The smoke rose straight into the stars, carrying prayers with it. Children learned to ride on the very earth where kings slept. Laughter mingled with the sigh of wind. To live was to keep the dead company. To die was merely to change the camp. Inside the tombs, time loses its grip. The fabrics and wood decay, the bones grow fragile, but the gold remains as bright as the day it was placed there. It glows like captured sunlight, proof that beauty can outlast flesh. In the flickering lamplight of the archaeologists who uncover them, the faces of the dead seem almost to smile, as if the Scythians knew we would find them one day. And maybe that was part of their design. Perhaps they built their tombs not just for the afterlife, but for memory itself. Each kurgan is a message buried in the language of silence. We were here. We rode the wind. We shaped the light. Remember us. There are hundreds of such mounds across the steppe, some small as cottages, others vast as cathedrals. From Ukraine to Kazakhstan, from the Crimea to Mongolia, they rise and fall like waves frozen in mid-motion. Each one a chapter in a story written not in ink but in earth. The largest, near the Dnieper, was said to hold the tomb of a king who united the clans. When it was excavated, the chamber revealed not only gold and weapons, but something rarer, a lyre carved from bone, its strings long decayed. Music. Even in death, the Scythians carried sound with them. It seems fitting. A people who lived by rhythm could not bear silence, even in eternity. You descend from the mound at last. The grass whispers against your legs, the air has turned colder. Behind you, the hill glows faintly under the moon, as if lit from within. The earth has its own memory of light. You think of the kings sleeping there, wrapped in felt and gold, surrounded by their horses, their faces turned toward the dawn. And you realize that what they built was not merely a tomb. It was continuity. A promise that motion never truly ends. Even buried they travel. Even dead they ride. When the wind blows across these plains, it carries their names in fragments, half-syllables lost among the grass. Listen long enough, and you might hear them, the whisper of hooves, the sigh of leather, the faint chime of metal beneath the soil. The steppe itself is their monument, endless and alive. Far to the north, dawn is beginning. A faint gray line touches the horizon. You mount your horse again and look back once more at the mound. The wind tastes of smoke. Thin at first, a thread of ash in the morning air, then stronger, richer, carrying with it the smell of burning herbs and fat. You follow it eastward, where the dawn grows bright and fierce, until the plain ahead shimmers with heat and movement. There, the Scythian camp is alive again, awake beneath the newborn sun. The sound reaches you before the sight of it. Low chants. The rhythmic creak of leather and rope. The neighing of horses, restless and bright-eyed. And beneath it all, the crackle of fire, that heartbeat of the nomad's world. The Scythians lived by the horse, but they worshipped the flame. Every camp, no matter how small, had its sacred hearth, a low ring of stones where the eternal fire burned. It was the breath of their goddess Tabidi, keeper of heat and life, mother of the hearth. Without her, even the strongest rider would freeze, even the mightiest king would fade into shadow. You ride closer. The camp unfolds like a living map, circles within circles. At the center burns the sacred flame, its smoke rising straight into the sky, as though stitching earth and heaven together. Around it stand the tents and wagons, their felt roofs glimmering faintly with dew. Further out, the horses graze in slow, sweeping arcs. The world hums with equilibrium. The Scythians do not rule the steppe. They move within its rhythm, guided by fire and faith. The people gather at dawn, drawn as naturally as birds to water. Men, women, children, elders, all circle the flame. No one speaks at first. Silence is its own prayer. Then, as the sun climbs higher, the chant begins, low, throaty syllables that roll like thunder under breath. It is not a song meant for ears, but for the world itself. The sound rises with the smoke, curling through air thick with the scent of burning horse dung and sage. You stand among them, feeling the vibration of their voices through the ground. The heat of the fire warms your face, reddens your skin. The air around you quivers, thick with the shimmer of heat and devotion. Tabidi's breath, they call it. Every spark is a fragment of her spirit, every flame, a memory of her touch. She is the guardian of the living, but also the guide of the dead. It is through fire that the soul travels, from flesh into light, from earth into sky. When the Scythians prayed, they faced east, toward the sunrise, the direction of life renewed. But they did not kneel. They stood. To bow was to humble oneself before gods of kings and walls. The Scythians' gods were not distant rulers. They were companions of the wind. You stood to meet them as equals. Their world was full of divine presence, not in temples, but in everything that moved. The sky was Papias, the father. The earth, Api, the mother, her body stretched beneath every hoofprint and river bend. There was the god of war, whom they represented not by an image, but by the sword itself, a blade thrust into the soil, gleaming beneath the sun. To them, that sword was alive. It pulsed with a power that was neither mercy nor cruelty, but necessity, the balance of life and death. When they gathered for battle, they circled the sword the way they circled the fire, singing, crying out to it to witness their deeds. The sword was not an idol. It was a reminder that the earth itself demanded strength. To live without courage was to insult the sky. And yet, for all their fierceness, the Scythians were not a people of blind violence. Their rituals show restraint, precision, and rhythm, the same qualities they prized in the hunt, in riding, in love. Even their sacrifices followed patterns older than speech. The gods were not fed blood out of hunger. They were fed memory, acknowledgement. To burn something in the sacred fire was to give it back to the world. A shaman steps forward now, tall, wrapped in a robe of fur and feathers, his hair streaked with gray, his face marked with lines of ash. Around his neck hang charms of bone, bronze, and horn. His eyes are strange, distant, unfocused, as if seeing through the fabric of air itself. He carries a bundle of reeds bound together with red thread. From a pouch at his side, he draws a handful of hemp seeds and throws them into the fire. The smoke that rises is thick, sweet, intoxicating. The people inhale deeply. The shaman's chant grows faster, his words tumbling over one another in the rhythm of trance. The world begins to blur, firelight dancing in waves, the line between sound and heartbeat dissolving. You close your eyes, and for a moment you too feel it, the pulse of the earth beneath your feet, the rush of wind across the plains, the faint, shimmering hum that fills the air like music beneath sound. This is the language of the Immerse, the Scythian shamans who crossed the borders of gender, body, and world. The Greeks could never understand them. Herodotus wrote of them with fascination and confusion, men who dressed as women, who spoke in riddles, who claimed their power came from the goddess herself. But to the Scythians, the Eneries were bridges, beings who walked between realms, who carried both the fire of the sun and the darkness of the earth. They were interpreters of dreams, healers of spirits, keepers of balance. The smoke thickens. The shaman sways, eyes closed, murmuring to something unseen. The people watch, silent and still. He reaches into the flame, pulls out a burning brand, and traces a circle in the air, a symbol of the sun, of eternity. When he throws the stick back into the fire, the sparks rise like stars, vanishing into the blue. The chant ends. Silence falls again. Only the crackle of the fire remains. The ceremony is done. The air feels lighter, as if the world itself has exhaled. Faith for the Scythians was not written. It had no priests and temples, no carved commandments. It was lived through motion, through habit, through fire. Every act of daily life was ritual. The way they tethered their horses. The way they shared meat at night. The way they greeted the dawn with smoke from the hearth. They saw the divine not as distant, but as constant. The sky was always watching. The earth was always listening. Even death was not escaped from that rhythm. When a warrior fell, his companions took a handful of earth and threw it into the nearest fire, saying nothing. That was enough. The fire knew. The flame carried the message faster than words ever could. As the day warms, the camp becomes a living prayer. Women milk the mares, the liquid foaming white in the buckets. Children chase one another through the grass, their laughter bright as bird song. A blacksmith kneels by a small forge, his hammer ringing out against bronze, sharp, clear, melodic. Each sound feels deliberate, part of the same unbroken song. You wander through it, watching, listening. Everywhere, small fires burn, not large enough to consume, only to maintain life. Near one, an old woman sits grinding herbs, humming softly to herself. You stop to listen. The tune is slow, circular, hypnotic. She notices your gaze and smiles, pointing to the fire. Tabidi, she says softly, touching her chest. Then she gestures to the sky. Papias. Her fingers brush the ground. API. She closes her hand, the gesture complete, fire, sky, earth, the trinity of survival. You nod, and she nods back, as if recognizing the understanding in your silence. As the sun climbs higher, the camp's rhythm changes. Men ride out to hunt, their horses kicking up dust. The women gather in a circle to weave, not cloth, but stories. They embroider patterns into felt, the same spirals and beasts seen on gold and skin. Each stitch is a tale, of ancestors, of dreams, of fire that never dies. They speak as they work, but their words drift between memory and myth. When night falls, the ritual changes again. The sacred fire is fed with fat and herbs until it burns high and bright. The people gather once more, this time to celebrate the living. A feast is laid out, roasted meat, fermented milk, bread made from wild grains. They eat with their hands, drink deeply from cups of bronze and wood. The laughter is loud, the gestures broad. Children run between the fires, chasing shadows. The air smells of meat, smoke, sweat, and wine. It feels human, raw, and joyous. Then come the stories, the songs of flame. Each tale begins the same way. When the world was still smoke. And from there, the storyteller's voice carries the people into a time before time, when gods and mortals shared the same fires. The stories shift with each telling, but the heart remains, the lesson that everything born of fire must one day return to it. You look up. The stars have risen, faint and silver between streaks of smoke. The fires below them flicker and shift, mirroring the heavens. For a moment, it's impossible to tell where earth ends and sky begins. The Scythians built their entire existence around this unity. No separation between body and soul, between life and death, between man and God. They lived inside the circle of fire, and in that circle, everything belonged. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnies, its voice cutting through the hum of laughter. A rider stands, stretches, and walks to the fire. He tosses a handful of herbs into it, the smoke rising in greenish curls. He whispers a few words, a private prayer, perhaps for safe travel, perhaps for forgiveness. Then he steps back, the act complete. The fire flares once, acknowledging. No more is needed. Later, as the camp quiets, the last embers of the fires glow red in the dark. The people drift to sleep, wrapped in blankets and hides. The horses settle, their shapes black against the stars. Only a few flames remain burning, the sentinels of the night, watched by those chosen to guard them until dawn. To let a fire die before morning would be a sin. It would mean breaking the chain, silencing the world's heartbeat. You sit near one of the small fires, feeling its warmth pulse against the chill. The wood crackles softly, sparks drift upward, vanishing into the wind. You find yourself thinking of all those sparks, how each one rises, fades, and is gone, yet the fire below remains. That, perhaps, is the essence of Scythian faith. The body may fade. The flame endures. Each life a spark, each death a brief darkness, the world itself the everlasting fire. The dawn begins again, pale and rose-colored. The guards feed the fires, coaxing new flames from the embers. The cycle repeats, night into day, death into life, smoke into sky. And as the horizon brightens, you feel the story moving forward again, as if pulled by the same invisible current that guides the Scythians themselves. Let's keep riding forward together, letting the smoke of the ritual fires thin into dawn, until it mingles with the breath of the living herds. The glow of sacred flame fades into sunlight. The chants turn into laughter, hoofbeats, and the sound of wooden wheels creaking through grass. The world of gods dissolves into the rhythm of survival, the quiet holiness of daily life. The sun lifts, a molten disk over the endless plain. The air trembles with warmth, smelling of grass, milk, and distant rain. You hear the first sound of the day, the low bell tied around a mare's neck, its tone soft and deliberate, like a heartbeat calling the world awake. The Scythians are already moving. They always move. To live here, in this land with no walls, no borders, no shade, is to become part of motion itself. The steppe rewards only those who travel. Stay too long, and the wind will find you, stripping your shelter, scattering your herds, burying you in your own stillness. For the Scythians, life was a circle that never closed. Each day began with departure, each night with arrival. They carried their homes with them, their world on wheels. From a distance, a Scythian caravan looks like a living organism, a great, slow-moving creature crawling across the horizon. Dozens of wagons roll side by side, their wheels groaning over the packed soil. The wagons themselves are vast, built from oak and elm, their frames lashed with rawhide and rope. Over them are stretched thick layers of felt, dyed in shades of ochre and brown. Inside, families travel, mothers nursing infants, children drowsy from the rhythm of movement, old men dozing in the half-light. Their belongings hang from hooks and beams, copper pots, bundles of hides, carved bowls, wooden flutes. Every creak, every sway, becomes part of the nomad's lullaby. Alongside the wagons ride the herders, tall, lean figures wrapped in wool and fur, bows slung across their backs. Their horses are small but tireless, their breath steaming in the morning air. Behind them trail the herds, cattle, sheep, goats, and the prized horses, the living wealth of the tribe. Dogs dart among them, barking and nipping, their coats dusted gold with pollen. You can smell it all, the musky warmth of animals, the smoke of last night's fires still clinging to cloaks, the sharp tang of fermented milk. It is not unpleasant. It is the smell of continuity. The Scythians' wagons formed the heart of their world. When they stop, the wagons turn inward, creating a circle, the nomad's version of a village, temporary yet complete. At its center burns a small fire, rekindled from the embers carried in bronze pots. The fire is always first. Only after it burns do they unpack the rest, the tents, the hides, the tools, the endless necessities of a life forever on the move. Children scatter to fetch water or chase foals. Women unroll felt tents, their movements practiced and quick. They hammer wooden stakes into the earth, stretch ropes, smooth the fabric with stones. By the time the sun stands high, a settlement has appeared, small, round homes dotting the plain, their doors all facing east. It looks effortless, almost organic, as if the land itself had sprouted people. Each felt tent is a universe. Inside, it smells of smoke, wool, and milk. Furs cover the ground, carved chests line the walls. Above hangs everything needed for life: bridles, cooking pots, leather pouches filled with dried meat or curdled cheese. At the center is the hearth, the flame brought from the last camp. Around it, they sit at night, eating, singing, sharpening tools, mending harnesses. This is home, though home will vanish tomorrow. For food, they depend on their herds. A Scythian's wealth walks on 4 legs. Milk, meat, hide, and bone, all flow from the animals they guard. The Maras give milk twice a day, thick and slightly sweet. They ferment it into kumis, the drink of life, cloudy, sour, and faintly intoxicating. It burns the throat, warms the blood, and softens the mind. Children drink it as readily as elders. It is said that no Scythian meal is complete without its taste, half nourishment, half communion. Their meat is simple, often boiled in iron cauldrons traded from the Greeks. They eat with fingers, tearing the flesh apart, dipping it in fat or salt. There is no ceremony, yet there is reverence, an unspoken gratitude to the animal whose body keeps them alive. Waste is a sin. Every part has purpose. The hides become clothing, the tendons bowstrings, the bones tools, the hooves glue. Even dung has value, dried and burned for fuel when the steppe offers no wood. And in this way, nothing is ever lost. Every act of survival becomes an act of faith. Their days follow the rhythm of light and grass. When the herds have eaten one pasture bare, the scouts ride ahead to find the next. They watch the sky, the behavior of birds, the smell of wind. They can tell from the bend of grass how long it has been since rain, from the taste of soil whether a place will sustain life. Then, when the decision is made, the camp moves, the entire world dismantled and reborn within hours. The Scythians know no nostalgia. They carry only what matters, leaving behind what does not. Every horizon is a promise, every departure a continuation. To them, permanence is death. Life is movement. Always. The seasons rule them. In spring, they follow the melting snow north, where the grass is tender and green. In summer, they climb toward the rivers and foothills, seeking cooler air. Autumn drives them south again, chasing warmth and game. Winter brings the hardest trials, bitter winds, frozen streams, nights that stretch like silence itself. In those months, the Scythians turn inward. Their camps grow tighter, their fires burn longer. They pile felt over the tents, hang furs to block the drafts, feed the horses from stored hay. The nights are long, but the people endure, singing, storytelling, repairing weapons, weaving. They tell tales of the summer to come, of the hunts that will return, of ancestors who survived worse. To them, winter is not an enemy. It is a teacher. It tests and strengthens. Every breath drawn against the cold is proof of life's defiance. Imagine standing in such a camp on a winter night. The stars blaze white in a sky so clear it seems you could fall upward into it. The tents glow from within, small, round lanterns scattered across the snow. The wind moans low across the grass, but inside, warmth gathers like a secret. You hear laughter, the creak of leather, the bubbling of stew. A woman hums a lullaby, her voice soft as wool. A man plucks a stringed instrument, a crude lyre carved from bone. Its notes are low, uncertain, but beautiful. The sound drifts through the tent walls, blending with the wind. It is both music and survival, proof that even here, in the center of nothing, humanity endures. Family for the Scythians is more than blood. It is a living network, clan, herd, and camp intertwined. Children grow up among cousins, uncles, and grandparents, their lives guided by a dozen hands. Elders tell stories by the fire, their voices raspy but steady, weaving myth and memory until the young know them by heart. Respect flows both ways. To ignore an elder's word is shameful, but so is hoarding knowledge. The Scythians believe wisdom must move, like the herds, or it dies. Their laws are simple, born of necessity. Share food. Defend kin. Keep promises. Never abandon a companion in the wild. To break these was not merely dishonor, it was exile. And on the steppe, exile is death. The Scythians' relationship with nature is not romantic. It is practical, symbiotic, unadorned. They know the moods of the steppe as one knows the moods of a friend, its generosity, its cruelty, its indifference. When storms come, they do not curse the sky. They tighten ropes, face the wind, and endure. When rivers flood, they move higher. When droughts strike, they ride farther. Adaptation is instinct, not philosophy. And yet, there is a quiet spirituality in that acceptance, a kind of grace that only the truly mobile can know. They live lightly on the land, leaving little trace but hoofprints and ashes. A camp disappears without a scar, swallowed by grass and days. Even their graves are subtle, low mounds merging back into the earth. The steppe forgets quickly, but perhaps that is mercy. To live here is to understand that nothing belongs to you, not even memory. Trade connects them to the settled world. Though they build no cities, they visit them, the Greek colonies along the Black Sea, the Persian fortresses to the south. They bring furs, grain, honey, slaves, and above all, horses, their most valuable currency. In return, they take wine, metal, fine cloth, and weapons. At first glance, they seem crude to the city dwellers, rough men with wild hair, eyes sharp as knives. But the Greeks learn quickly that behind the Scythians' blunt speech lies intelligence, as keen as any philosopher's. The Scythians know the value of what they trade. They bargain hard, laugh loudly, and ride away richer, not only in goods but in stories. Sometimes they linger in those cities, fascinated by their walls, their markets, their gods of stone. But not for long. The air feels too heavy there, the streets too narrow. Within days, they yearn for the horizon again. Freedom to a Scythian is not an idea. It is breath. They teach this to their children not through words, but through life. A child learns to ride before he can speak clearly. To fall is to learn balance. To lose a horse is to learn responsibility. Games mimic war, archery contests, wrestling, races across the plain. Victory brings no trophies, only pride. Even play has purpose, preparation for the endless demands of motion. Yet there is tenderness too. Parents braid charms into their children's hair, tiny beads of bone or bronze shaped like birds and stags. They whisper blessings before each ride. May the wind know your name. May the ground remember your step. And at night, when the camp quiets, they sleep in piles of warmth, parents, children, dogs tangled together, wrapped in furs that smell of smoke and home. You begin to understand, watching them, that their existence is not one of deprivation, but of choice, a deliberate harmony with a world that cannot be tamed. The steppe is their teacher, their mirror, their test. Its vastness demands humility, its danger breeds courage. The Scythians have no need of walls or kings because their strength lies within the tribe, within movement itself. Their democracy is the saddle, their council the fire. Decisions are made in circles, not hierarchies but horizons. They speak until agreement forms, not through dominance but through rhythm. Even their arguments sound like wind over grass, rising, falling, finding balance. When sickness comes, the shamans burn herbs and chant to the fire. They believe illness is a wandering spirit lost inside the body. The smoke shows it the way out. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. But they never lose faith in the cycle. Death, too, is part of the herd's movement, one more rider joining the ancestors' invisible caravan. When a child is born, the entire camp celebrates. A new flame is lit for the newborn, its smoke mingling with the old. The mother drinks kumis for strength. The father rides out and returns with a tuft of grass, a symbol of the world's abundance. The baby's first breath is greeted with laughter, because to breathe on the steppe is victory enough. As the day wanes, the camp begins to settle again. The wagons form their circle, the fires flare, the herds draw close. The people move slower now, their shadows long in the amber light. Dinner smells drift across the grass, roasting meat, milk warming in pots. Children chase the last sunlight, their hair catching gold. Someone begins to sing, a low melody that rises and falls like the sway of a horse. It is not a song of triumph or sorrow. It is a song of existence, of the steady, endless continuity of life. The stars come out one by one, mirrored in the eyes of the horses. The wind softens, cool and dry. The Scythians sleep easily. They trust the rhythm of the world that has always carried them. The steppe at dawn glows like hammered copper. The horizon breathes fire. The wind carries the faint scent of milk and leather. Somewhere beyond the herds, riders are gathering, a line of silhouettes against the rising sun. Among them, women. Their hair bound tight, their armor light and fitted close. Their horses restless beneath them, snorting plumes of steam into the chill air. They are neither queens nor priestesses. They are soldiers, Scythian women, riders of the steppe, archers whose names were whispered with awe from the Black Sea to the Aegean. To the Greeks, they were a contradiction. Women who fought beside men? Women who killed, commanded, and refused to bow? It could only be myth, they thought. So they gave them a name of legend, Amazons. But to the Scythians, there was nothing mythical about them. They were kin. They were necessary. They were part of the rhythm of life and death, equal riders on the same wind. The Greeks wrote of encounters that blurred the line between memory and dream. Herodotus told of Scythian warriors who, after a battle near the Sea of Azov, discovered their enemies were not men at all, but women, fierce, tireless, unyielding. He claimed that some Scythians took them as wives, though it was the women who set the terms. "We cannot live in your camps," they said. "We are not made for domestic life. If you wish to be our husbands, you must live as we do, hunt, ride, and share the burden of freedom." And so they formed new tribes, children born of two wild bloods, carrying in them the unbroken strength of both man and woman, sun and storm. But beneath the layers of Greek imagination lies truth as sharp as flint. Archaeologists have uncovered it, graves scattered across the steppe, women buried with weapons at their sides, their bones marked by the same scars of war as the men's. Some lie with bows still intact, arrows bundled neatly at their hips. Others wear bronze helmets, belts adorned with gold plaques showing hunting scenes and battles. Their horses are buried beside them, their armor folded with care. These are not tokens. They are lives. The Greeks made them myth. The Scythians called them family. If you had wandered through a Scythian camp at dawn, you would not have known who was man or woman by the way they moved. Both rose before the sun. Both saddled horses, checked arrows, tended to herds. Their lives were bound by the same necessity, survival and motion. And necessity does not care for hierarchy. In the world of the steppe, every hand that could draw a bow was sacred. The girls learned early. Their first toys were small bows carved from horn, their arrows blunt and harmless. They practiced balance before walking, gripping with their knees as their mothers rode slowly across the grass. They watched the men hunt, the older women train. They grew strong in the same air, the same wind, the same relentless rhythm. By adolescence, their muscles were rope and fire. Their eyes could judge distance better than any ruler, their hands could string a bow faster than speech. They rode with hair streaming, cheeks windburned, laughter sharp as song. They did not see themselves as different. They were Scythian. And to be Scythian was to ride. When danger came, and it always came, the women fought. They did not wait behind wagons or cower by fires. They took up bows, mounted horses, and joined the men in the charge. Their arrows sang the same deadly tune, their courage was indistinguishable. To fight was not a privilege. It was a duty, woven into the bloodline of the steppe. There are stories, some half-remembered, some carved in gold, of women who led entire bands into war. One tells of Aya, daughter of a chieftain, who avenged her father's death by raiding the enemy's camp at night, cutting down every man she found. Another speaks of Idantara, who took command after her husband's fall, leading the defense of their people for years until peace returned. In her old age, she was buried with her sword across her lap, her hands still callous from the grip. The earth remembers her touch. But to think of them as mere warriors is to miss their depth. These women were not hardened by cruelty, but shaped by necessity. They bore children and wielded weapons with the same calm purpose. They knew that to protect life, one must sometimes carry death in one's hand. There was no contradiction there, only balance. After battle, they returned to ordinary tasks, mending clothes, tending fires, singing to infants. Their strength was quiet, cyclical, the rhythm of creation and destruction entwined. In the evenings, when the horses were tethered and the fires lit, you might find them sitting side by side with the men, polishing blades and braiding hair. The air thick with the scent of smoke and sweat. The talk easy, the laughter deep. A woman might tease her husband about his aim. He might answer with a smile and a nod. Equality was not declared. It was lived. Among the Scythians, love and war shared the same vocabulary: risk, endurance, rhythm. A woman might choose her lover as she chose her horse, for strength, for understanding, for trust. Marriage was partnership, not ownership. If a man failed in courage, he lost her respect. If a woman proved braver, she was honored, not shamed. Their love was fierce and fleeting, like the seasons, bound by the same cycle of departure and return. And when a woman lost her partner in battle, she mourned him with ritual, not despair. She cut her hair short, rode his horse into the next fight, and carried his spirit forward. To remain idle would dishonor him. To ride was to remember. Even the Scythians' art honors these women. On golden plaques and carved bone, you see them, archers in flowing tunics, their hair tied back, their arms steady. They are not portrayed as distant goddesses or delicate beauties. They are dynamic, in motion, bow drawn, horse mid-leap. Each line hums with power and grace. To the Scythians, the female warrior was not an anomaly. She was an ideal, the embodiment of harmony between strength and beauty, motion and control. In one mound near the Down River, archaeologists found the grave of a young woman barely 20 years old. She lay on her back, her face turned east. At her side rested an iron sword, a quiver of arrows, and a mirror of polished bronze. The mirror's handle was carved in the shape of a griffin, a creature of air and fire. In her hair were beads of amber, at her feet, a horse's skull. The bones of her right arm bore marks of old injuries, healed, endured, survived. She had lived as a fighter. She was buried as one. And yet, even in death, she was not defined solely by war. The mirror tells another story, one of self-awareness, of reflection, a beauty acknowledged even in the shadow of mortality. She was a warrior. She was also a woman who braided her hair, who smiled, who sang. The Scythians saw no need to separate these truths. You sit now beside one of their fires, the night wrapped around you. Across the flames, a group of women sharpen arrows. Their movements are unhurried, precise. One hums softly, a melody half lullaby, half battle hymn. It is the sound of continuity, of a world where tenderness and strength breathe the same air. Nearby, a mother teaches her daughter how to fletch an arrow. The girl's small fingers tremble as she ties the feather in place. "Not too tight," the mother says, smiling. "Let the wind help you." The girl laughs, adjusts, and holds it up for approval. The feather catches the firelight and glows gold. "Good," the mother says. "Now you're ready. Tomorrow, the child will ride. One day, she will fight. Always, she will remember." The Greeks could not imagine such freedom. In their cities, women lived behind walls, their lives measured by silence and obedience. So when they met the Scythians, when they saw women riding bare-armed across the plains, laughing as they loosed arrows from galloping horses, they could only turn wonder into myth. They called them Amazons, without men, unable to believe equality could exist. But the Scythians needed no myth. They needed only truth. And so, when Greek merchants returned home, they told tales of a nation ruled by warrior queens, of fierce lovers and deadly beauty, of women who scorned domestic life. The stories grew until they reached Athens, where poets turned them into epics, the Amazons who battled Heracles, who fought at Troy, who rode with the speed of lightning and the ferocity of storms. But behind every poem, every carving, lies the faint echo of real hoofbeats. The echo of the Scythian women who taught the world what freedom truly meant. These women were more than soldiers, they were symbols of balance. In them, the Scythians saw the reflection of the steppe itself, fertile yet dangerous, nurturing yet untamed. They embodied the duality of creation and destruction that defined all life in motion. When they fought, they did so not for glory, but for equilibrium, to preserve the fragile harmony between tribe and world. And when peace returned, they became its guardians, tending to children, herds, and memory. Their power did not fade with age. The elders held knowledge deeper than any sword cut. They were healers, seers, storytellers, the voices who remembered the old ways, the rituals of fire, the patterns of the stars. Around the hearth, their words carried weight enough to shape decisions, to settle disputes, to heal wounds that weapons could not. Imagine one such elder now, sitting beneath the stars. Her hair is white, her skin lined by wind and years. Her bow rests beside her, its strings still taut, though she rarely draws it. Children sit at her feet, listening as she speaks. Her voice is soft but unyielding, the kind of voice that has seen storms and survived them. She tells them stories of long rides and lost loves, of battles won not by strength but by patience. She reminds them that the steppe gives, and the steppe takes, and that courage lies in accepting both with grace. When she falls silent, the night seems to listen too. Somewhere in the distance, wolves call. She smiles faintly, as if answering. To her, they are not threats, but reminders of the wildness that must never die within the heart. And you understand, sitting there, that the Scythians' world is built on partnership, not domination, not hierarchy, but flow. Man and woman, horse and rider, earth and sky, all moving together in the same eternal circle. To break that circle would be to unmake the steppe itself. Their power lies in balance, in knowing that strength and gentleness, like fire and grass, cannot exist without each other. The women of the Scythians carried that truth in their blood, their laughter, their silence. They were the pulse that kept the heart of the nation steady. They rode beside the men, never behind them. And when they were gone, their names lived on, not in stone inscriptions, but in legend, in poetry, in the unending wind that still whispers through the plains. The fire before you burns low. A woman stands, stirs the embers with a stick, and feeds them a handful of dried dung. The flames flare, golden and alive. For a moment, her face glows with light, sharp features softened by warmth. You think of all the faces before hers, all the riders who have come and gone, all the women who have carried fire in their hands and freedom in their bones. The night hums with their memory. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of rain. Far off, thunder murmurs, distant, rhythmic like drums. Tomorrow, perhaps, there will be battle again. But tonight the camp is still. The warriors rest, their horses tethered, their hearts steady. And above them, the stars burn, countless, bright, eternal. You close your eyes and listen to the whisper of the grass, the slow breathing of the steppe, the faint clink of metal and bone. The Scythians sleep, but their story rides on. Because even as the night deepens, the world beyond them stirs, merchants, wanderers, and strangers from across the sea, coming to trade and to wonder at these lords of the plains. The morning light rolls over the steppe like a slow tide. The grass glitters with dew, each blade tipped in silver. And far to the south, where the horizon wavers and the earth begins to smell of salt, a new sound joins the wind. The creak of masts. The cry of gulls. The human noise of cities. You have been traveling for days with the Scythian riders, watching the landscape change grain by grain. The plains begin to dip and fold, the rivers widen and grow lazy. The air grows heavy with warmth. And then, one morning, you crest a ridge and see it. The sea. A great sheet of blue fire, stretching farther than the steppe itself. The wind that hits your face smells of things the Scythians do not name: brine, fish, foreign smoke. It is the scent of another civilization. Below, where the grass gives way to stone and sand, white buildings cling to the coast like shells. This is Albia, a Greek colony on the edge of the known world, a city that smells of wine, bronze, and ambition. To the Greeks, it is the last bastion of reason before chaos. To the Scythians, it is merely another camp, a strange, permanent one made of walls instead of wheels. The Scythians ride down the slopes slowly. Their horses hesitate on the unfamiliar ground. The Greeks on the walls stare. To them, the riders must look like creatures from myth, hair wild, faces tan and stern, bows curved like crescent moons. Some of the Greeks cross themselves, others smile with curiosity. They have seen these visitors before. They know the smell of steppe horses, the sound of hooves on stone. They know trade is coming. And danger. A Scythian chieftain raises his hand in greeting. Behind him, carts rumble forward, heavy with furs, grain, wax, honey, slaves, and the finest horses in the world. This is how worlds meet, not in conquest, but in commerce. The Greeks bring wine, olive oil, silver, painted pottery, luxuries the Scythians value less for use than for beauty. The Scythians bring everything that grows or moves across the plains, the lifeblood of the north. Between them, a market blooms like a temporary truce. You walk among them now, Greek merchants in white linen and bronze bracelets, Scythian traders wrapped in fur and wool, their knives glinting at their belts. The air hums with barter, laughter, and misunderstanding. Hands wave, gestures repeat, numbers are drawn in dust. Languages collide and merge in the universal grammar of trade. A Greek holds up a jug of wine, a Scythian nods, tastes, grimaces, and offers a horse in exchange. The Greek laughs, half fear, half delight. He's heard stories of these people, riders who live without houses, who drink the blood of horses, who kill swiftly and vanish into grass. Yet here they are, flesh and voice and humor, haggling over amphorae like any man of the market. They share bread and laughter, suspicion and awe. It is the oldest kind of diplomacy, two worlds discovering they can coexist, for a moment, through trade and story. To the Greeks, the Scythians are both fascinating and terrifying. Herodotus, sitting in some shaded courtyard in distant Halicarnassus, writes of them as men without houses, without boundaries, who drink from the skulls of their enemies. And yet, in the same breath, he calls them invincible riders, unmatched in freedom. The contradiction says everything. They are the Greeks' reflection, the other half of their myth. Where Greece built temples, the Scythians built movement. Where Greece prized logic, the Scythians revered instinct. Each saw in the other what they themselves could not be. The Greeks loved to imagine their opposites, men who lived as nature intended, unchained by law, pure in savagery. And the Scythians, watching the Greeks fuss over weights and coins, must have found them soft, brilliant, perhaps, but fragile as glass. Each world held something the other envied. Trade deepens into friendship, and friendship into curiosity. Greek artisans learned to copy Scythian designs, the flowing lines of their animal-style art. Goldsmiths in Olbia and Panticapaeum carved plaques of leaping stags and coiled griffins, selling them back to the very people who inspired them. Scythian chieftains began to wear Greek jewelry, to drink from Greek cups, to commission Greek potters to paint scenes of their own lives, riders hunting, warriors feasting, women fighting beside men. The steppe begins to appear on Greek pottery, the nomad's image captured in clay and myth. And from these encounters, something new is born, a shared language of symbols, where civilization and wilderness dance around each other like wary lovers. Not all meetings are peaceful. Sometimes, misunderstanding curdles into violence. A Greek caravan wanders too far inland and vanishes, swallowed by the steppe. A Scythian war band raids a coastal town, burning storehouses and stealing wine. For every alliance, there is a wound. For every treaty, a story of betrayal. Yet even in conflict, there is respect. The Greeks know that no army can truly defeat the Scythians. How do you conquer wind? And the Scythians know that the Greeks possess a magic unlike any they have seen, the magic of permanence, of art that survives motion. One fights with bow and speed, the other with pen and stone. Both understand beauty. Both hunger for legacy. And in that mutual hunger, the first threads of connection endure. One evening, you sit by a Greek campfire near the coast. To your left, a Scythian chieftain drinks from a wine cup. To your right, a Greek philosopher watches him with cautious fascination. The philosopher, perhaps one of those restless thinkers who wander from polis to polis, questioning the gods, asks through a translator, "Why do your people never build cities?" The Scythian pauses. He looks into the fire, his face lit by the red flicker. Then he answers, voice low and deliberate. "Because walls fall. The earth moves. The horse does not." The Greek nods, half understanding. He takes a sip of wine, gazes into the flames, and murmurs, "Perhaps your wind is our wisdom, only freer." The Scythian smiles, not in mockery, but in agreement. For a moment they are equals, men from opposite worlds, bound by wonder and warmth. The Greeks study the Scythians not just as traders, but as teachers of paradox. In their eyes, the steppe is both savage and sacred. They imagine it as the birthplace of gods and monsters, of Artemis the huntress, of the golden griffins who guard the northern gold, of the Amazons whose arrows fly like meteors. They call the Scythian lands Hyperborea, the place beyond the north wind, a paradise of eternal light. In these myths, the Scythians become something more than human, a mirror in which Greece sees its wild soul. Herodotus writes that the god Apollo himself visits the Hyperboreans each winter, fleeing the confines of Olympus to dwell among the free. It is an inversion of the Greek dream, the civilized god longing for wilderness. Perhaps Herodotus understood, even if dimly, that freedom and wilderness are divine siblings. And yet, for all the Greek wonder, the Scythians remain unmoved by flattery. They trade, they listen, they leave. They take what they need, metal, pottery, salt, and return to the only home they trust, the horizon. The Greeks might write their names into scrolls, might carve their likenesses into amphorae, but the Scythians have no need for such permanence. Their immortality lies elsewhere, in movement, in memory, in the wind. When a Greek trader asks a Scythian why his people do not write, the Scythian laughs. "What would we write on?" he says. "Grass?" The trader insists. "So your stories will not be lost." The Scythian points at the horizon. Nothing is lost. The wind remembers. The Greek shakes his head, unable to argue. In time, Greek and Scythian worlds blend in small ways: marriages, exchanges of ideas, shared gods. Some Scythians begin to honor Dionysus, seeing in him a familiar spirit, the god who dances, drinks, and destroys boundaries. Some Greeks, in turn, start to burn incense to Tebete, the Scythian goddess of fire. Shrines appear on the edge of Olbia where Greek marble meets Scythian leather, altars where wine and milk are poured side by side. Civilization and wilderness entwined. The poets sing of this strange kinship. They say that when the north wind blows, it carries the voices of Scythian flutes. They say that the gods themselves envy those who live without walls. Perhaps they are right. For even as Greek civilization expands, even as its philosophers debate, its artists sculpt, its cities rise, a part of it will always dream of the steppe, of the boundless sky, of the people who bow to no one. But time, like the wind, shifts direction. The Greeks grow richer, more settled. The Scythians, restless as ever, begin to fade into the edges of history, their power diffused, their tribes divided. The balance between motion and stillness begins to tremble. And yet, even as the centuries turn, they never vanish completely. Their image persists, carved into vases, etched into memory, haunting the imagination of empires yet unborn. The Greeks called them barbarians. But the word itself, barbaros, once simply meant those who speak differently. To the Greeks, the Scythian tongue was a song of thunder and distance. To the Scythians, Greek speech was too slow, too soft. Each language carried its own truth, its own poetry. And when they met, something larger was born, not one voice silencing another, but two melodies weaving together in the great music of the ancient world. You stand again on that coast, wind whipping at your cloak, the sea roaring beneath the cliffs. Behind you stretches the steppe, vast and golden. Before you, the blue infinity of the Aegean's promise. Between them stands the thin, fragile bridge of understanding built by trade, curiosity, and story. You realize that these two worlds, the writers and the builders, the wanderers and the philosophers, needed each other more than they ever admitted. Without the steppe, the Greeks might never have known their own boundaries. Without Greece, the Scythians might never have seen their reflection in art. They complete each other, as opposites often do. The wind changes. It carries the scent of horses again, grass, smoke, motion. The Scythians are leaving. They do not stay where stone grows thick. They ride back into the heart of their world, the sea shrinking behind them until it becomes only memory. You watch them go, the line of riders fading into the trembling horizon. Their silhouettes are dark against the rising sun, the same eternal image that has haunted poets for 2,000 years. And as they vanish, the wind sighs like turning pages. The Greeks will write their stories. The Scythians will ride theirs. But both will endure, each carrying a fragment of the other. When future empires rise, Rome, Persia, Byzantium, they will all inherit something of this meeting, the curiosity of Greece, the freedom of the steppe. And somewhere, hidden in the fabric of history, the laughter of those first traders still lingers, the sound of two worlds learning to speak. The wind sighs across the plains again, long and low, like breath drawn through the strings of a harp. You feel it brush against your face, cool and endless. Somewhere beneath your feet, in a mound of earth older than memory, lies the art of the Scythians, not painted on walls or carved in stone, but hidden like flame inside the darkness of the soil. When the archaeologists first found it, they thought the gold would be cold. It wasn't. It burned softly under the light of their lamps, alive with the shapes of beasts and spirits, muscles coiling, claws extended, wings poised in perpetual flight. Each piece shimmered with motion, as if waiting for breath. Even after 25 centuries, the metal remembered movement. That was the genius of the Scythians, to make the inanimate pulse with life. You kneel beside one of these treasures now, a small golden plaque, no larger than your palm. At first glance, it shows a deer, its legs folded beneath its body. its antlers flowing backward in swirling arcs. But the longer you look, the less still it becomes. The curves of its muscles ripple like water, the antlers twist like smoke. It is resting and leaping in the same moment, time folded into form. This is the Scythian style, the language of motion rendered eternal. They called it the animal style, though the phrase comes to us from scholars, not from them. To the Scythians, these creatures were not decorations. They were prayers. Every figure, the stag, the panther, the eagle, the griffin, held meaning drawn from the invisible rhythm of the steppe. Their world was filled with animals, herds that fed them, beasts that hunted them, spirits that guided them. They saw no boundary between life and symbol. The animal was both real and sacred, both flesh and metaphor. To carve one was to speak the language of existence itself. The stag was life, grace, the spirit of rebirth, its antlers branching like the veins of the earth. The panther was ferocity and speed, the silent killer that moves like shadow across grass. The eagle was vision, the sky's messenger. The horse was loyalty, the breath between man and God. And the griffin, half beast, half bird, was the guardian of the boundary between worlds, the keeper of gold and soul alike. When the Scythians engraved these forms, they were not copying nature. They were translating it. Every curve was an invocation, every muscle a syllable of myth. Even the smallest ornament, a clasp, a belt buckle, the head of a pin, carried the weight of cosmology. In their art, the visible and the invisible intertwined. To wear such a piece was not vanity. It was protection. Each golden plaque was a talisman, a small piece of the steppe spirit bound to the body of its bearer. Their artists were not mere craftsmen. They were shamans of form. They understood how to conjure life from matter. Imagine one now, sitting cross-legged in the dim light of a tent, a small fire burning beside him. Before him lies a lump of raw gold, dull and heavy. He heats it in a clay crucible, watching as it softens, glows, and begins to breathe. With small bronze tools he shapes it, pushing, engraving, coaxing the creature within to emerge. His hands move with a ritual precision, guided by memory more than sight. Outside, horses stamp and snort. The wind hums against the felt walls. He works in rhythm with it all, as if sculpting the air itself. When he is done, the metal no longer looks like metal. It looks like life caught in the instant before transformation. He lifts it to the firelight. The beast he has freed stares back, fierce, eternal, awake. Gold was sacred to the Scythians. They found it not only in the rivers and hills of their lands, but in the stories that surrounded them. The Greeks told of griffins who guarded the northern gold, creatures fierce enough to kill any man who dared to steal from their nests. To the Greeks, that was myth. To the Scythians, it was history. They believed the gold belonged to the creatures of the deep earth, that to touch it was to borrow power from the underworld itself. So they handled it with reverence. They did not hoard it as coin. They shaped it into meaning. When a Scythian king died, gold was placed beside him not as wealth, but as spirit armor, the light he would carry into the next world. Even horses were adorned with golden masks and harnesses, turning them into celestial beasts ready to gallop through the afterlife. To cover a horse in gold was not vanity. It was transformation. The animal became divine, its body the vessel of eternity. Each artifact you find in a tomb tells a story without words. A golden comb unearthed near the Dnieper River shows a battle frozen mid-strike, 3 warriors, their muscles tensed, their faces vivid with purpose. The detail is astonishing, veins on their hands, the plait of their hair, the rippling mane of a horse. Every line breathes tension. It is not just art. It is a heartbeat stopped in gold. Another piece, found deep in the permafrost of the Altai, depicts a scene stranger still. A stag being devoured by a panther, the two locked in an eternal circle of attack and surrender. But look closer, and you see something subtler. The deer's eyes are calm, almost serene, while the predator's claws curve like tendrils of flame. Life and death are not enemies here. They are partners in an endless dance. To the Scythians, creation and destruction were one motion, the turning of the same cosmic wheel. Their art does not shy from violence, but it never glorifies it. It shows the truth of balance, that everything that kills also feeds. This obsession with motion defined them. Even their simplest patterns curve and twist as if alive. Their designs flow like water, never breaking, never resting. To hold a Scythian ornament is to feel time itself moving through your fingers. No straight lines. No rigid symmetry. Just endless, spiraling rhythm, like wind across the grass, like hooves over the plain. And perhaps that is why their art still speaks to us. It refuses to be still. Even now, centuries later, it demands to move. Their art was not limited to gold. They carved in bone and wood, too, the small portable materials of a traveling life. A horse's bridle might be decorated with bone plaques engraved with deer or eagles. A dagger's hilt might be shaped like the head of a wolf. Every object, no matter how functional, carried beauty. There was no separation between art and utility. To live beautifully was to live rightly. A warrior's belt, a woman's comb, a child's toy, all were imbued with the same care. Sometimes they painted with bright pigments on leather or fabric, though few colors have survived the centuries. We know from traces of red ochre and blue copper that their world was not drab-brown, as so many imagine. It glowed. Their tents were patterned, their clothes embroidered, their horses painted with sacred symbols before battle. They wore the sky itself, its colors, its stories, stitched into the fabric of daily life. The Scythian imagination was cosmic. Their art mirrors the structure of the universe. Above, the realm of birds and the sun, home of the eagle and the griffin. Below, the realm of beasts, serpents, and the stag who guards the gates of rebirth. And between them, the realm of men and horses, mediators between earth and sky. Each creature they carved was a map of that balance. To decorate an object was to place oneself within that order, to align one's soul with the eternal motion of heaven and soil. They had no temples of stone, but they carried their faith in gold. Their gods did not dwell in sanctuaries, but in the shimmer of a bracelet, the curve of a pendant, the eye of a beast carved into the edge of a blade. Where the Greeks built columns, the Scythians built symbols. Their art was their architecture. It moved with them across the endless grasslands, a portable cosmos of light and meaning. When Greek artisans met Scythian traders, a strange and beautiful fusion began. The Greeks were masters of form and proportion, the Scythians, of motion and spirit. In their meeting, art itself evolved. Goldsmiths in colonies like Olbia and Panticapaeum learned to copy the flowing lines of Scythian design, blending it with their own classical symmetry. Scythian chieftains, in turn, began to commission Greek craftsmen to shape their treasures, but always in the old steppe style. The result was breathtaking, Greek technique fused with Scythian soul. Animals leapt across golden plaques with the realism of Athens and the mysticism of the steppe. It was collaboration across philosophy, logic meeting instinct, order embracing chaos. This hybrid art spread across the ancient world, carried on wagons and ships alike. Even in Persia and beyond, echoes of Scythian style appeared, the same spirals, the same leaping beasts. They had created not just a culture, but an aesthetic that moved with them, as boundless as their horizon. Centuries later, when archaeologists began to unearth their tombs, they were stunned by the sheer sophistication of the craftsmanship. How could nomads, people without cities or forges of stone, produce gold work finer than any found in Athens or Babylon? But the answer lies in their way of life. The Scythians' hands were never idle. They crafted while traveling, forged metal beside campfires, carried tools in wagons. Their artistry was born of necessity and refined by patience. The rhythm of movement became the rhythm of creation. Imagine the concentration required, working delicate filigree while the wind tugs at the tent walls, while horses stamp outside, while the horizon shifts with every sunrise. To make beauty in such a world is to declare defiance, to say, even in motion, we endure. The greatest discovery of their art came from the frozen tombs of Pazyryk in the Altai mountains. There, beneath layers of ice, time itself paused. When the archaeologists opened the wooden chambers, they found fabrics still bright with color, wood still smelling of resin, and gold still gleaming as if freshly made. Most astonishing of all were the tattoos, swirling patterns of beasts inked into human skin, the same designs found on the gold and bone. The art lived not only on objects, but on bodies. The Scythians carried their mythology in their flesh. On the shoulder of one warrior, a stag runs forever, on another, a griffin grips a serpent. These tattoos are not mere ornaments, they are declarations of identity, marks of passage, stories written in skin. Through them, the body becomes sacred ground, a living canvas of faith and motion. Their art is more than survival. It is philosophy. It tells us that beauty need not be permanent to be eternal. A plaque buried for millennia, a tattoo faded by death, both still speak, still move, still breathe. The Scythians understood what few civilizations ever have, that to capture life, you must let it flow. Their art refuses to freeze the world into symmetry, it keeps the pulse alive. Perhaps that is why their gold feels warm, because it holds the heat of hands that never stopped moving, the breath of horses, the hum of the wind. It is art made not for walls, but for journeys. Art that lives only when it travels. Now, as you stand in a modern museum, the light sterile and cold, a Scythian necklace rests behind glass. Its links are shaped like tiny lions biting their own tails, eternity devouring itself. You lean closer, and for a moment, you can almost smell the smoke of the campfire, hear the rustle of the tent, the whisper of the grass. The gold glows faintly, as if remembering. You realize it has not truly been still for 25 centuries. It is still moving, in your gaze, in your breath, in the endless retelling of its story. The Scythians may be gone, but their art remains alive, the last motion of a people who refused stillness. The sky darkens by degrees. At first, it's only a veil of cloud drifting over the horizon. Then the wind begins to change, sharper, colder, carrying the taste of dust instead of grass. The horses lift their heads uneasy. The fires burn lower. And for the first time in centuries, the steppe feels empty. It begins not with a battle, nor with the death of a king, but with a shift so gradual no one notices. The herds grow thinner. The rains come late. The rivers, once silver arteries through endless green, run shallow and brown. The grass, the lifeblood of all things, begins to turn brittle under the sun. The horizon, once boundless, seems to pull inward. The Scythians have ruled this land for centuries, their hooves thundering across it like the beat of time itself. No empire has tamed them, not Persia, not Greece, not the restless tribes that brushed against their borders. But even freedom must answer to the turning of the world. And the world is turning against them. You ride among them still, the same people, the same rhythm. But something is different now. The faces are harder. The songs are shorter. The laughter rarer. Where once every ride carried the promise of discovery, now it carries the weight of endurance. Their art still gleams, their horses still run. But the steppe no longer feels like a gift. It feels like a test. The old roads between tribes, those invisible paths of trade and kinship, begin to fray. Where there was unity, there is now suspicion. Where there was motion, there is hesitation. Each clan grows more protective of its herds, its land, its fire. And when scarcity meets pride, peace becomes fragile as grass under frost. To the south, new powers rise. The Persians, though beaten once, grow strong again, their borders pushing northward with the patience of an advancing tide. Their emissaries arrive with gifts of gold and promises of alliance, but the Scythians know the scent of ambition when it rides the wind. They do not trust the tongues of kings who live behind walls. Yet trade continues, and through trade, so does temptation. Fine fabrics, coins, metalwork, spices, things that once seemed unnecessary begin to seduce the young. The steppe, once sufficient unto itself, begins to look toward the world beyond. In the west, Greek colonies grow rich from commerce. Albia, Panticapaeum, Chersonesus, names the Scythians now know as well as the rivers they cross. But where once they traded as equals, they now find themselves treated as subjects of curiosity, relics of a wilder past. The Greeks, with their coins and councils, speak of civilizing the north, and the Scythians, hearing it, say nothing. They have no need for cities. But silence is not agreement. It is the quiet before distance becomes divide. To the east, the steppe trembles with movement, new riders, new tribes. The Sarmatians. They come like a mirage out of the dawn, their horses lean and long-limbed, their faces fierce and unfamiliar. At first they seem kin, cousins of the wind, sharing the same gods, the same love of freedom. But kinship on the steppe is as fragile as smoke. They come not as guests, but as rivals. The Sarmatians hunt the same herds, claim the same rivers, ride the same trails. Their arrows fly farther, their tactics mirror those of the Scythians' own ancestors. It is like fighting a reflection, one that learns faster, hungers deeper. Skirmishes begin as misunderstandings and end as massacres. The old alliances crumble, replaced by mistrust and exhaustion. The Scythians, who once taught the world the art of vanishing, now find nowhere left to vanish to. The winters grow longer. The summers grow cruel. Something in the balance of the earth has shifted. Some blame the gods, say that Tabites' flame burns lower, that Papeos no longer smiles on his children. The shamans perform rituals beneath blackened skies, burning herbs, whispering to the wind. But the wind gives no answer. It only moans across the empty grass, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke and ash, not sacred, but human. Someone's camp burning. Someone's memory erased. Imagine one of those camps now. A small circle of tents under a gray sky. The people move silently, packing what remains, a few pots, a handful of grain, the bones of a horse too weak to walk. Children cling to their mothers. Old men stare toward the horizon, eyes clouded not with fear, but disbelief. The world they knew, the endless, dependable rhythm of migration, is breaking. The herds no longer follow the old paths. The rivers have shifted their courses. The wind, once an ally, has become unpredictable. It carries sand where it once carried rain. And the Scythians, masters of adaptation, find themselves facing something even they cannot outride, time itself. Still, they endure. They always endure. They ride farther north, following the memory of greener lands. They cross rivers that freeze early, mountains that bite with frost. They split into smaller tribes, scattering like seeds in the wind, each carrying a fragment of the old flame. Some settle near the Dnieper, others near the Don. Some fade into the Carpathians, others vanish east into Siberia. Everywhere they go, they leave behind a trace, a mound, a shard, a story. The steppe forgets quickly, but not completely. Even in their decline, there is dignity. They do not beg. They do not plead for refuge. They ride until the grass gives way to forest, until the horses can no longer gallop. Then they dismount, build fires, and wait for the stars to appear. They do not curse the gods. They have never believed in permanence, and so their fall feels less like tragedy and more like return. Meanwhile, the world beyond them grows louder. Empires expand: Persia, Macedonia, Rome. Each sends scouts and soldiers into the northern wilds, chasing rumors of gold and horsemen. They find remnants, bands of Scythians guarding the edges of their old dominion. They call them barbarians, vagabonds, ghosts. But even ghosts have teeth. The Scythians fight with the same precision as their ancestors, ambushing columns, vanishing into fog. No empire ever truly conquers them. They simply dissolve, absorbed by the very wind they once commanded. The morning opens like a slow exhale. Mist rolls over the grasslands in silvery waves, the sky wide and forgiving again. You can almost believe, standing here, that time itself is breathing. There are no riders in sight, no fires, no camps. And yet, everything moves. The rhythm of hooves still hums in the soil. The grass bends as though under a passing shadow. The world remembers. This is the steppe's secret. Nothing ever truly ends here. It only changes form. The Scythians have vanished into history's haze, their names scattered, their bones hidden beneath earth and legend. But their presence lingers, not in monuments or ruins, but in the living habits of the land. Every people who came after them, Sarmatians, Alans, Huns, Turks, Mongols, carry traces of their way. Their ideas, their rhythms, their reverence for motion spread like pollen on the wind. The Scythians became not a lost civilization, but the foundation of every nomadic soul that followed. Imagine the steppe as a vast mirror, reflecting and refracting its own past. The Sarmatians who replaced the Scythians rode with the same grace, the same bows curved like the horizon. Their women, too, fought beside their men. Their warriors carried gold plaques etched with leaping stags, the same symbol reborn in a new age. They inherited the fire and the freedom, refining both until they burned like prophecy. The Alans, who followed, spoke tongues that carried echoes of Scythian speech. Their gods bore the same faces, their burials followed the same rituals. Even the music of their flutes, low, haunting, breathy, carried the same cadence as the wind through old grass. It is as if the steppe itself composed one long, unbroken song and passed it from people to people, century to century, verse to verse. When the Huns thundered westward, driving fear into empires, they rode on horses descended from Scythian herds. Their stirrups, their bows, their tactics, all were the perfected echoes of that ancient rhythm. They were different, yes, but the spirit was familiar, swift, untethered, unyielding. The Romans would tremble before them, calling them demons from the east. But they were only the wind made visible again. Later came the Turks, the Mongols, each one reshaping the world, each one carrying within their blood the same restless inheritance. The Mongols would build empires that spanned continents, yet even they never forgot the value of motion, the wisdom of grass, the song of the open plain. Their yurts, their rituals, their love for the horse, all were born from the same endless horizon the Scythians once ruled. When Genghis Khan's riders thundered across Asia, their silhouettes against the dawn looked no different from those Herodotus described 2,000 years before. The steppe teaches one lesson only, but it teaches it perfectly. To move is to live. To stay is to die. Even in death, their influence grew roots beyond the grasslands. In Greek art, Scythian archers became symbols of exotic mastery, guardians of Apollo's temples, carved into marble friezes. In Persian reliefs, they appear as emissaries and mercenaries, proud and fierce, their trousers and tall boots immortalized in stone. In the myths of Europe, they became ancestors of warriors and wanderers alike, the lost forebears of tribes that claimed descent from the riders of the north wind. Even in places that never saw their camps, the Scythians lived on in imagination. They became archetype, the eternal nomad, the untamable soul. Every empire needs its opposite, its mirror of freedom. To Greece, they were wildness, to Rome, defiance, to every city-bound civilization that followed, a reminder that life can be lived without walls. And so their absence became a kind of presence, a haunting, necessary myth through which humanity measures the cost of its own domestication. The echoes reach even farther. In languages scattered across Eurasia, their words endure, faint, weathered, but still traceable. The Scythian tongue was an ancestor to many. Its sounds survive in fragments of Ossetian, in whispers of Iranian dialects that drifted east and west. To speak them today is to breathe the same syllables that once rode on wind. Their names for the gods, for the sky, for the horse, all carried the same root meanings that shaped modern speech: fire, sun, life, movement. In folklore, too, their ghosts persist. The Amazon legends, those fierce women warriors who haunted Greek dreams, are nothing less than memories of Scythian riders. Even now, when we imagine the image of the woman warrior, we echo their silhouette, the bow drawn in motion, hair bound against the wind, gaze steady as horizon. They are alive in every story of freedom's daughter, in every culture that celebrates courage without apology. But the truest legacy of the Scythians is not in art, or word, or blood. It is in the idea they left behind, the philosophy of movement. They taught the world that civilization need not mean stillness, that culture can travel, that beauty can exist without permanence. They proved that a people could thrive without cities, build memory without walls, and create art that lived only as long as the journey itself. In a world obsessed with roots, they became the masters of wings. They believed in cycles, not lines, in return, not conquest. Where others sought to own the land, they sought to understand its rhythm. Where others built monuments to resist time, they built lives designed to flow with it. It was not weakness, it was wisdom, the kind born from watching the seasons turn, the rivers shift, the sky renew itself without end. The day is ending. The sun drifts low, its light poured thin across the endless grass. The steppe breathes in slow rhythms now, as though it, too, were tired from centuries of motion. The shadows lengthen, merging with the folds of the land until everything, hills, herds, memory, becomes one soft shape. It is here, in this quiet hour, that the past feels closest. You can almost hear them, faint, distant, but unmistakable. The jingle of bridles, the crackle of a campfire, the murmur of voices speaking in a language no longer known to the living. The steppe holds sound the way the sea holds light. Even when the riders are gone, their echoes ripple outward, never truly still. The wind rises, not sharp now, but tender, like an old hand brushing over the earth it has known forever. It carries the scent of ash and grass, smoke and cold iron, the same scents that greeted us when we first opened our eyes on this world of motion. We have come full circle. And so the story closes, not with conquest or ruin, but with understanding. The Scythians have not disappeared. They have become what they always worshipped: the air, the fire, the rhythm. They ride forever in the world's invisible spaces, between storm and silence, between history and dream. If you stand on the plains someday and feel the wind rise suddenly, carrying the scent of smoke and grass, do not be afraid. It is only the past passing through you, gentle as breath. It will brush your face and keep moving, leaving behind a whisper that sounds almost like words. We are the wind. We are the memory of motion. We are the ones who cannot be still. The stars fade, the east brightens. A new dawn waits just beyond the edge of vision. You rise, stretch, and take one last look at the horizon, the same unbroken line that has guided every traveler since the first rider took to his horse. Then, with the wind at your back, you begin to walk. Each step feels light, timeless, familiar. The journey continues, as it always has, as it always will. And so, as the morning sun climbs once more over the boundless steppe, the last words drift like a prayer on the wind. May these echoes of the past guide you gently into dreams,